Chapter 714. Eric, I think that if you insist, it won't be a big problem for Firefly to get 70% of AE Television Network's shares. Hearst Group won't have any initiative in this matter, Katzenberg said to Eric at the lunch after the meeting. Eric was holding a plate in his hand and picking food with Katzenberg at the buffet table. He turned to look at William Hearst, who was chatting with Tom Murphy not far away, and said, "If we want Lifetime TV to develop, we will definitely need a lot of investment in the early stages. Hearst Group's participation will not only share the investment risk, but their support in print media all over the world is also very important. Moreover, we have already obtained absolute control of the shares. In the future, Hearst Group won't have any initiative, right?" Eric's words were somewhat unfinished, but Katzenberg immediately understood. He grinned slyly, revealing a row of big front teeth. When Lifetime TV developed, as the absolute controlling shareholder, Firefly would have countless ways to dilute the shares in Hearst Group's hands. After the two of them finished picking food, they found a table and sat down. Katzenberg said, "I couldn't attend the children's birthday a few days ago, so I asked Peter to help me send a gift. Did you receive it?" "Of course, they all liked it very much." Eric nodded and said, "What about you? Are you planning to go back to Los Angeles for Easter?" "Marilyn and the rest are all in New York. They are spending the year with my parents, so I don't have to run around," Katzenberg replied. He had married very early. His wife was Marilyn Siegel, and they had a pair of twins. After a few simple words, the two of them involuntarily turned to work again. During this period of time, the senior management of the group had focused on discussing the general development plan of Lifetime TV station, and had somewhat neglected the specific production of the show. In the morning meeting, after consultation with Hearst Group, the final planning plan was finalized. At this time, Katzenberg began to care about the host of America's Top Model. This matter had been discussed since the Oscars, but it had been pending. In the end, Eric wavered between Cindy Crawford and Linda Evangelista. Tara Banks, the original host, was eliminated because of her age. "Eric, there's less than half a year left before the fall season in September. The reality show needs to be produced in one go. We don't have much time to waste. Who will you choose between Linda Evangelista and Cindy Crawford? Have you thought about it?" Eric hesitated for a moment before saying, "I've been thinking about this as well. Both of them are very outstanding. So Jeffrey, what do you think of splitting them into two?" Katzenberg frowned slightly. "Eric, you're saying that it's not a good idea to let them take turns as hosts. Changing hosts will easily distract the audience." "No, what I mean is, since we now have $100 million in project funds, why don't we start two reality shows at the same time, and let them be the hosts respectively?" Katzenberg's interest was piqued. "Eric, do you have any good ideas again? I've been troubled by this recently. I have some ideas, but I don't know much about them." Katzenberg looked puzzled. He didn't quite understand what Eric meant. "I mean," Eric continued, "this idea is also related to last year's Victoria's Secret show. During the preparation of the project, the designers had to come up with dozens of designs for angel outfits almost every week, but in the end, only 40 sets were finalized. The elimination rate was very high. Some of the designers' designs weren't even used. I've been thinking recently that since we can hold a modeling competition, why can't we create a reality show about fashion design competitions? It's just that I don't know anything about fashion design, so I don't know if we should implement this plan." Eric was talking about Project Runway, which was as famous as America's Top Model. These two shows could be said to be rivals. They were launched at about the same time, and the ratings were about the same. As the hosts of these two shows, Tara Banks and Heidi Klum had both taken the top 2 places on Forbes' list of the highest-paid female TV actresses. Unfortunately, Eric was not interested in fashion design in his previous life. He had only watched a few episodes of America's Top Model because he wanted to see long legs, but he had never watched Project Runway at all. Compared to Eric's hesitation, Katzenberg was very optimistic. He said, "Eric, a lot of times, a successful project starts with an idea. Walt Disney also came up with the idea of Disneyland when he saw his daughter playing. At that time, he definitely didn't know how to build a Disneyland, But now Disneyland has spread all over the world. Moreover, I think your idea is better than America's Top Model. Countless people in the United States are very interested in design. Those celebrities who are slightly famous like to launch their own personal brands, but most ordinary designers who are unknown find it difficult to make a name for themselves. If we can provide such a fashion design reality show platform, not only can it attract outstanding civilian designers to participate, but the audience who have their own design dreams will also like to watch such a show. As for fashion design, we just need to leave it to the professionals to deal with the problems in the field of fashion design. The Hearst Group has so many top fashion magazines in the world. They can casually get an editor-in-chief to be the art consultant of this reality show. Cindy and Linda have been supermodels for so many years. Their taste in fashion is definitely better than most ordinary designers. They are qualified to be the hosts of the reality show. Okay then. The two of them have recently come to New York. I'll think about it again, and talk to them while I'm on break during Easter. Eric was convinced by Katzenberg's words. He was hesitant mainly because he wanted to be safe. After all, if the original program failed right after the start of the reform of Lifetime TV, it would have a great impact on the future plans of the TV station. Now that he thought about it, he would first start the production and see how it turned out. If the quality of the program did not meet his expectations, he would just put the project on hold. At most, he would lose a few $1,000,000. In the West, Easter was the first Sunday after the full moon on the spring equinox. Students had a week of spring break during this period, but it was not a national holiday. However, it was the weekend after all. Eric returned to East Hampton, Long Island early. He planned to spend it with his women and children. This year's Easter was much later than previous years. Easter was usually in March, but this year, it was April 16th. At the same time, Resident Evil, which was produced by DreamWorks Animation and distributed by MGM, was officially released in 2,500 theaters a week before Easter. Resident Evil cost $30 million, which was considered a medium cost. Eric did not use the movie version in his memory. Instead, he designed the plot according to the main storyline of the game version. Compared to Myra's live-action version, Eric preferred the two 3D animated movies released by Capcom based on the plot of the game, especially the fight scene between Sister Wong and the East Slavic female president in Resident Evil. Curse. It was so cool. Although the plot could not start from Resident Evil Curse as long as the villain was changed and Ada Wong appeared in the script, the fight scene could still be included in the movie. Therefore, during the writing of the script, Eric specially drew some relevant scenes for the scriptwriter to figure out. During the filming, he also specially invited a Hong Kong martial arts director to be in charge of the fight scene. Without a doubt, the effect was very good. After the movie was released, the most talked about part of the movie, other than the special effects of Lord Lick fighting the tyrant, was the close combat fight between Ada Wong and the villain played by Hu Kylie. Hu Kylie's fame also increased because of this, and she became a martial arts actress that movie fans love to talk about. Although the reviews of the movie were generally not good, with the smooth plot, perfect settings and enough plot highlights, the movie received $23 million in box office in the first week. It was a very good start. The industry estimated that the North American box office of the movie would reach $60 million because of this, which would basically cover the cost of production. Moreover, Eric also knew that the important market for Resident Evil was not in North America, but overseas. In the Resident Evil series in his previous life, none of the North American box office exceeded $100 million, but it became the first movie series based on a game to exceed $1 billion in the global box office. Although there was no lack of media mocking this movie as the worst box office result since Eric entered Hollywood, when the box office of the movie was released, the executives of MGM and DreamWorks Animation called Eric one after another, hoping that he could immediately start the production of the sequel. In the villa of East Hampton Manor, Eric hung up the phone call from MGM CEO, Frank Marcoso, and got up to walk out. It was Saturday, April 15th. Yesterday, the box office for the second week of Resident Evil was released. Compared to the same period in the first week, the box office only dropped 30%. As a result, The total box office of the movie was adjusted to a high of $70 million US. Therefore, Frank Marcoso couldn't wait to call Eric again. While reporting the good news to him, they discussed the sequel. Eric naturally had no problem with that. The temperature in New York in April had just warmed up during the day, but it was a nice day with bright sunshine and a moderate temperature. On the lawn in the backyard of the villa, Joanna and Virginia were sitting at a table with the children, drawing Easter eggs. Eric walked out of the villa, went around the swimming pool, and came to the lawn. He picked up Emma, who was running over to show him the little egg in her hand, and came to the table. He looked at Eva Pakula, who had popped up again in the time it took him to make a phone call. He smiled and said, "Why are you here?" Eva picked up a paintbrush and poked Eric with dissatisfaction. "My sister despises me. Do you despise me too?" "How would I dare to despise you?" Eric smiled and dodged. He put Emma on a small chair, and the little girl immediately grabbed the paintbrush on the table, forgetting about Eric's existence. Eric looked around. Virginia was holding Kevin's little hand and drawing an image on an egg, looking like she was having fun. When she saw Eric coming over, she even raised the egg and gestured to Eric, looking like she was showing off her son. Hawaii, who was sitting on Joanna's lap, was holding a paintbrush in her hand, but her little eyes were filled with boredom. Eric leaned over and kissed his baby son's cheek. He pulled a chair over and sat down. He reached out and took Hawaii from Joanna's arms. "Come, baby. Is mommy's drawing bad? Let daddy teach you." Joanna looked at Eric as he carried her daughter over. She smiled and handed the egg and paintbrush over. "Xiaxia isn't interested in these. Maybe my drawing is too bad." "Okay, then let's draw a face first." Eric held Hawaii's little hand like Virginia. Hawaii struggled in Eric's arms. She felt her father's rough hand holding her little hand, and she relaxed helplessly and sighed. "Sigh, why did I draw such boring things on the boiled egg? So stupid," the little girl complained in her heart. She raised her head and looked at the little boy sitting in Aunt Vicky's arms. She pouted. TSK. He actually smeared paint on his face. So stupid. Her gaze drifted to her mother's side. Joanna supported her chin with one hand, and looked at them with a warm smile on her face. The little girl sighed again in her heart. Sigh. However, when I saw the happy look on Mommy's face when she looked at Daddy teaching her how to draw, I forced myself to pretend to be as clumsy as Kevin. But it's so difficult. Sigh, stupid Daddy. You can't draw a crooked face when you're holding my little hand. The little girl complained in her heart. In the end, she couldn't help but ask, Daddy, why are we drawing these? To celebrate Easter, Eric explained. Then why is there Easter? Because people say that Jesus will be resurrected on this day. Hence it's called Easter. Who is Jesus? The Son of God. Who is God? I can't say for sure. Then why are we celebrating the day of Jesus' resurrection? Because Jesus is the belief of many people. What is belief? Belief is something in one's heart that one has to adhere to. Adhere to what? Adhere to what you think is right. Daddy, then what is your belief? Oh baby, you asked me. But you can ask your mommy. Mommy, what is your belief? God. The little girl blinked her big eyes that were as beautiful as her mother's. She combed through the information in her mind and found a circle. Then, she realized that her parents were patronizing her again. Sigh, how can these adults treat a child like this? She's only 2 years old. Chapter 7:15. The two cars shuttled through the narrow asphalt roads of East Hampton one after the other, until they stopped outside a manor near the sea in the south of East Hampton. Cindy Crawford and Linda Evangelista got out of the two cars respectively, and walked to the manor's gate. They pressed the doorbell and waited patiently for a moment before a woman's voice sounded. After they reported their names, the gate automatically opened to the left and right. They returned to the car again, and drove into the manor. They bypassed the S-shaped cement corridor, and stopped in front of a luxurious European-style villa. A middle-aged maid came over and waited for them to get out of the car. She said politely, Miss Crawford, Miss Evangelista, please come with me. The two women followed the maid with their bags. Cindy Crawford asked the maid, Where's Eric? Mr. Williams is painting Easter eggs with his wife and children, The maid replied and led the two women to the living room of the villa. She asked another younger maid to make coffee for them and walked to the backyard. When Cindy Crawford and Linda Evangelista heard the maid's words, their expressions changed slightly. They looked at each other, but at the same time, they looked away. From the moment Eric informed them to come to New York, the two of them realized that the host position of America's top model was very likely to be between the two of them. Although there were 3 fewer competitors, the hidden smell of gunpowder between the two of them was a little stronger. At this time, they only maintained a superficial courtesy. However, the maid's unabashed words had inexplicably pulled the distance between the two women closer. Looking at the maid who was making coffee not far away, Cindy Crawford leaned over and whispered, "How much do you think this manor costs?" "20 million. Who knows? We can't afford it anyway," Linda Evangelista said casually. But she remembered what she saw when she drove into the manor. The front yard of the manor was 5 or 6 acres in size. She didn't know what was behind it. According to the layout of the villa near the sea, there should be a private beach. It was definitely more than 20 acres, which was equivalent to 8 hectares. Although the two of them were considered to have a high income, they definitely wouldn't be able to afford such a manor even if they gritted their teeth and bought it. What's more, a manor in East Hampton wasn't something that could be bought just because one wanted to. The United States had a unique system of neighborhood autonomy. Not only did the buyer and the seller have to agree on the price, but the buyer also had to get the approval of the other residents in the neighborhood where the property was located. The residents of East Hampton were either rich businessmen, politicians, or celebrities. It was not easy for the two of them to squeeze into this circle. The maid served the two of them coffee and politely asked if they had any other invitations. Seeing the two of them shake their heads, the maid left. The living room fell into a brief silence. Cindy Crawford took a sip of coffee and turned her head to look at the glass door that led to the backyard. After some thought, she gave Linda Evangelina a look, stood up, and quietly walked over. Linda Evangelista felt that Cindy Crawford's actions were a bit inappropriate, but after a moment of hesitation, she couldn't hold back her strong curiosity and followed her. The two of them stood side by side behind the glass door and looked into the backyard. The first thing that caught their eyes was a swimming pool, which was a standard feature of many American courtyards. Looking further, they saw a white cement road. On one side was a pocket-sized children's playground, and on the other side was a lawn. On the lawn was a table with all kinds of small things piled up. 6 or 7 figures of different sizes were around the table. The maid who had just greeted them was standing next to them. Eric, in casual sportswear, was leaning over the table and intimately kissing the woman and child opposite him. The fact that Eric already had a child was not a secret to many people, but it was the first time for the two of them to see it. According to their past experience, Cindy Crawford and Linda Evangelina both thought that Eric would definitely keep the illegitimate child a secret, or even refuse to admit the identity of the illegitimate child at all, like many billionaires. However, the scene in front of them completely subverted their understanding. Even though they were far away, they could tell from the intimate interaction between Eric and the child that he was really a competent father. After a moment of absent-mindedness, Cindy Crawford withdrew her gaze and glanced at the luxurious European-style villa beside her. She sighed softly. "It's really frustrating. If we work hard for a lifetime, it's better to have a child." As soon as her voice fell, Cindy Crawford suddenly sobered up. She glanced at Linda Evangelina. When the two pairs of beautiful eyes met, Cindy Crawford noticed that Linda Evangelina's eyes flickered. She immediately realized that Linda Evangelina must have had the same idea as her. This made her feel relieved and not as guilty as she was before. Not daring to peep anymore, the two of them returned to the sofa and sat down together in silence. On the lawn in the backyard, Eric was holding a Hawaiian egg and drawing on it. Hearing the maid's report, Virginia, who was sitting opposite him, immediately rolled her eyes. "You're really busy. You haven't even finished a basket of eggs, and you've already gone out several times. I also want to stay at home to accompany you for a while, so I put my work here. But I promise, this is the last time. No one will disturb us on Easter tomorrow." Eric smiled and let go of the Hawaiian egg. Seeing that Virginia was still unhappy, he got up and leaned over with both hands on the table. Come baby, let daddy kiss you. With that said, Eric moved closer to Virginia's face. You bad guy, taking advantage of me again. Virginia said as she turned her face to let Eric kiss her. Then, she lifted Kevin in her arms. Eric also kissed his son's tender face and retracted his body. Emma, who was beside him, jumped over. Daddy, I want a kiss too. Okay. Eric also kissed Emma's face and moved closer to Joanna, intending to be impartial. When it was Hawaiian's turn, the little girl quickly blinked her big eyes a few times. It seemed that this was a good opportunity to get rid of the boring task of drawing eggs in front of her. Letting Eric kiss her face, the little girl reached out her small hand and tugged at Eric's sleeve. Daddy, can I go with you to meet the guests? Before Eric could answer, Joanna rubbed Hawaiian's little head and smiled. That won't do, baby. Daddy has something very important to discuss. Hawaiian recalled Emma's coquettish appearance and tugged at Eric's sleeve again. Her voice was soft and her eyes twinkled. Daddy, I'm just a child. I don't know anything. I won't disturb your discussion. Eric was speechless when he heard Hawaiian's words. Everyone was silent for half a second. Then Virginia, Joanna, and Eva laughed almost at the same time. Eva was overjoyed and slapped the table twice. She reached out and hugged Hawaiian, rubbing the little girl's face. Haha, little vixen. Don't you think you've exposed yourself with that sentence? Haha. Auntie Eva, you're so annoying. Don't rub my face. Otherwise, I'll despise you together with Mommy. Hawaiian pulled at her aunt's arm and threatened angrily. However, her tender voice did not sound threatening at all. Wow, that's a vicious threat. Let Auntie Eva rub her face again. I'll let go. Otherwise, I'll bite you. Okay, stop fooling around. Xia, come to Mommy. Don't disturb Daddy. After laughing for a while, Joanna came out to smooth things over. She pushed her sister away and hugged her daughter in her arms. She waved at Eric and told him to get back to work. After painting the Easter eggs for a while, Eric's clothes were stained with dye. He hurriedly changed his clothes and washed his hands before coming to the living room. Linda, I'm sorry. I had to make you come here personally, Eric said as he hugged the two girls. It's fine. We're not too busy anyway, Cindy Crawford replied with a smile. Eric nodded and said, Come with me to the study. We'll talk there. When they arrived at the study, Eric took out 2 prepared documents from the bookshelf and sat down at the desk. He looked at the 2 girls who were sitting opposite him with nervous expressions and smiled. You don't have to worry anymore. Originally, there was only the production plan for America's Top Model. However, I recently came up with an idea, so both of you can get jobs. Cindy Crawford put away the messy thoughts that had just appeared in her mind and said, Eric, are you saying that Firefly is planning to produce 2 fashion reality shows? Yes, Eric nodded and said. Among the 5 of you, I think the 2 of you are the most suitable. Now there's only one problem left. Which job will the 2 of you take? Cindy Crawford and Linda Evangelista looked at each other and did not speak. They waited for Eric to continue. You already know about the America's Top Model project, so I'll talk about another idea first. It's also a talent show, but the contestants are not models but fashion designers. Therefore, the preliminary name of the show is Project Runway. Linda Evangelista heard this and said, Eric, America's Top Model is better, but the professional fashion design is too professional. Will anyone like it? Eric did not answer, but asked, Have you 2 ever thought of creating your own personal brands? Well, we have, but we've been too busy, Cindy Crawford replied. I've thought of creating a perfume brand, Linda Evangelista said with a shrug. Obviously, the experience brought by the idea was not pleasant. Eric said, That's right. The entertainment industry is like you. People with a little fame like to launch their own personal brands. Then, for more ordinary people, they must have the same idea. This show can cater to many people's dreams. This is the audience base of the show. Of course, another part of the audience base is the urban women who are very sensitive to fashion. Project Runway will be broadcast on Lifetime TV, which is owned by AE Television Network. The main target audience of this TV station is young women. Then can we take a look at it first? Cindy Crawford pointed to the documents in Eric's hand and asked tentatively. Eric held the 2 documents and said, "These have little to do with the show. It's just some rough budget for the project. You have to figure out the specific format of the show yourself." Cindy Crawford and Linda Evangelista were puzzled again. Didn't Eric ask them to be the hosts? Why did it sound more like they were producers? "It's like this," Eric continued. "I originally had some ideas about America's Top Model, but now I've changed my mind. I plan to completely hand these 2 projects over to the 2 of you. I will only be responsible for the overall situation." "Eric, I don't quite understand," Cindy Crawford said. It was not that she did not understand, but she was somewhat in disbelief. Eric said, "You definitely understand. What I mean is that the 2 of you will be the hosts and producers of America's Top Model and Project Runway respectively." Although Linda Evangelista was very envious of the title of producer, she knew her own ability. She said, "Eric, I don't seem to know what to do." "Then, let's talk about your remuneration first." Eric smiled and said, "As the producers of these 2 shows, you will get a 10% share of the profits of America's Top Model and Project Runway. As for how much you will get in the end, it depends on how well you produce the shows." "Eric, do we need to participate in the investment?" Cindy Crawford's eyes lit up and asked. "Of course not. Firefly will provide a production budget of $20 million for each project. You don't need to participate in the investment. Then what do we need to do?" Linda Evangelista was also excited by the 10% share of the net profit. Although Eric said that he would completely hand over the 2 projects to them, as long as he personally supervised them, Linda Evangelista knew that the risks of these 2 shows would definitely be minimized. Even if they could not reach the terrifying ratings and profits of Survivor, the commercial returns would definitely be very impressive. "That's the main point." Eric smiled and said, "Don't think that this 10% share of the profits will be easy. The reason why I'm handing these 2 projects over to you is that I don't know much about the fashion industry, and the 2 of you have been in this circle for so many years. You are familiar with all the rules and have enough vision and experience. Therefore, although Firefly will provide some staff, you will need to build the professional team yourself." Chapter 716. One of the most important reasons why the original America's Top Model and Project Runway were so successful was that the 2 hosts, Tara Banks and Heidi Klum, were deeply involved in the production of the show as they were both producers. Although Eric had watched several episodes of America's Top Model, he knew that even if he were to personally design the show, it was very likely that he would produce something that was neither fish nor fowl. That was because he didn't know much about fashion. He could simply distinguish a model's makeup and walk, but he couldn't comment in detail on what was good and what was bad. However, these problems were no problem for the 2 top supermodels who had been in the fashion industry for many years. However, if he wanted these 2 beautiful women to devote their full attention to the 2 shows, just being the hosts was definitely not enough. Therefore, Eric came up with the idea of producing the show according to the cooperation model in his previous life. He would share a small part of the profits and let them deeply participate in the production of the show. This way, Eric could be more at ease. After Eric finished speaking, Cindy Crawford pointed to the document in Eric's hand and said, "Eric, you asked us to build our own creative team, but if we only have a production budget, we don't know what to do." Linda Evangelista echoed, "Yes, Eric, you should give us some guidance, right? Let's divide the tasks first." Eric smiled and handed the 2 documents in his hand to Cindy Crawford and Linda Evangelista respectively. He said, "According to my understanding of the 2 of you, I think Cindy is more suitable for America's Top Model. So Linda, you will be in charge of Project Runway." Linda Evangelista took the document from Eric's hand. She didn't open it eagerly like Cindy Crawford. She hesitated and said, "Eric, you don't know me well enough. Otherwise, you would know that I am more suitable for America's Top Model. I am the first supermodel." From the conversation just now, Linda Evangelista realized that Project Runway was an idea that Eric had come up with on the spur of the moment. The supermodel competition was more commonplace than the design competition. In that case, the prospects of Project Runway were definitely not as good as America's Top Model, which had been brewing for a long time. Although she could only accept Eric's insistence. After all, behind them were the other 38 angels of the Victoria's Secret Legion, waiting for such an opportunity. She wouldn't do something as foolish as giving up the opportunity to others, but Linda Evangelina still felt that she should fight for it in case Eric agreed. Before Eric could say anything, Cindy Crawford retorted, "Linda, I am the first supermodel to be a TV host. Obviously, I am more suitable for America's Top Model than you. What's the use of being a fashion show host for a few years?" "To be honest, Cindy, I don't think your taste in clothes today is very good. I was just too embarrassed to tell you." "Oh, thank you for your advice, Linda." Cindy Crawford gently stretched her body in the office chair. She wasn't angry at all. She smiled at Eric and said, "Eric, Linda's taste in clothes is better than mine, so she is more suitable to be the producer of Project Runway." Linda Evangelista didn't expect that she would fall into the trap she dug. She snorted gloomily and looked at Eric. "Hey, don't argue. It's settled." Eric looked at the two women and smiled. "I have more confidence in the two of you now." "Oh, why?" Cindy Crawford felt that Eric's smile was a little naughty, but she still asked curiously. Eric didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, "Do you know what the most important thing in a reality TV show is?" The two women raised their heads at the same time. Eric didn't keep them in suspense and said with a smile, "The most important thing in a reality show is the drama. The dialogue between the two of you just now doesn't need any editing at all to be added into the scene of the reality show." No matter what kind of reality show it was, there was an element that couldn't be missing. In the West, this element was called the drama. In the East, it was called the drama. Cindy Crawford and Linda Evangelista were a little embarrassed, but Eric didn't mind. He continued, "Actually, the prospects of the projects in your hands are about the same. The most important thing is whether you can do it well. Just like Project Runway. If you can capture the essence of a reality show, even if the audience doesn't understand fashion design at all, they can find the fun of watching the contestants compete." Cindy Crawford happened to watch Survivor. When she heard Eric say this, she asked, "Eric, I have always been wondering, does Survivor have a script?" Eric nodded and said with a smile, "Yes, it does." Cindy Crawford suddenly felt like she had been cheated. After all, Survivor had always used a completely unscripted show as a marketing gimmick. In the past, she had liked Survivor more. Then the things we see on TV, they were all planned? You will have to do it yourself, so you definitely need to understand this. Reality TV shows definitely have a script, but this kind of script is not the kind of script used in movies and TV series. It is a script for the show. In this kind of script, other than some iconic lines of the host, it is mainly based on the contestants' personalities to design some possible plots. Moreover, this kind of plot setting is not forced for the contestants to execute. The program team will guide them in a more subtle way. As Eric spoke, he looked at the two women with a smile and said, "For example, I want the two of you to argue, so I give the project that both of you are more optimistic about to one of you. The other one is dissatisfied, so the situation just now happened." Linda Evangelista said angrily, "Eric, you are really despicable. You are making fun of us again." "What I said is the truth." Eric smiled and continued, "In addition, there is also the guidance of benefits. As long as the contestants participating in reality TV are smart enough, they will know what the program team wants them to do. Under the stimulation of a huge sum of money, they will take the initiative to do what the program team wants them to do. The script in the minds of ordinary people is often a script with lines, but the script in reality TV shows is a script with actions. Therefore, it is not a lie that the reality show does not have a script." Cindy Crawford asked, "Eric, what if the contestants are not willing to execute the plot we have designed? There are so many contestants in a reality show, and the production team can collect at least several hours of material during each filming process. However, the official broadcast of each episode is only 43 minutes long. Therefore, you can completely choose the scenes that meet your needs from a pile of material. If all the material is not good enough, then the problem will definitely lie with you. In addition, For those contestants who are stubborn, the result is very simple: pass. At the end of the show, there will be fewer and fewer contestants. At that time, there is no need to worry at all, because those who can stay will definitely be familiar with the rules and willing to accept them. Wow, it feels like my whole outlook on life is about to be turned upside down. Then is this still a professional reality show? I mean, can our professional knowledge be used? Linda Evangelista opened her small mouth exaggeratedly and sighed. Eric nodded and said, "Of course, if the fashion designer in your show can produce works that amaze everyone in the future, for the sake of fairness, you will definitely have to keep him or her. This is the principle that strength trumps everything. However, the possibility of people with this kind of strength participating in a reality show is definitely very low." Cindy Crawford did not feel as emotional as Linda Evangelista. She was thinking about more practical things and said, "Eric, I was thinking, can you transfer 1 or 2 skilled producers from the Survivor project to us?" "Of course, even if you did not mention this, I would have done so. I just said that Firefly will provide some staff for you. This is what I was referring to." Linda Evangelista was not to be outdone. She asked, "Then Eric, can you briefly explain your thoughts on Project Runway? I can't possibly produce it without any direction, right?" Although he had not watched Project Runway before, it was a copycat of America's Top Model, so Eric could roughly figure out the format of the show. He said, "First, you have to build a creative team. Firefly will transfer a few professionals who have participated in the production of Survivor to you. But if you completely copy the format of Survivor, I can almost predict that this show will fail. Therefore, you have to create your own style on the basis of Survivor. Take Project Runway as an example. You'll need to find a few judges. There will be 3 permanent judges, including yourself, a veteran fashion designer, and the chief editor of a fashion magazine. You can look for them from the Hearst Group. They will cooperate with you. Of course, if you have a suitable candidate, you can also follow your own ideas." Linda Evangelista tilted her head and thought for a while. She then said, "Eric, what do you think of Anna Wintour?" Eric was speechless. Cindy Crawford laughed and said sarcastically, "Linda, I think Karl Lagerfeld is more suitable. You can invite the Empress Dowager and give him the position of producer and host." Linda Evangelista realized that she was being a little whimsical as soon as she said that, but she did not back down. She said to Cindy Crawford, "I was just saying, do you have to be so happy? Okay, stop arguing." Eric liked to watch cats fight, but now was not the time. When the 2 women turned their attention to him, Eric continued, "Linda, you have to understand that you are the core and the brand of this show. Therefore, the most famous person in this show can only be you. Even I will be completely hidden behind the scenes, and will not appear on any producer's list. In terms of selecting judges and guests, at least the 2 regular guests must not be more famous than you. You also have to consider the sustainability of the guests. Even if you have the connections, you can't let others attend the show for free. You have to pay for the guests. However, the budget of this show is only $20 million, which is not a big deal. Therefore, you can occasionally invite big names in some special episodes, which can be regarded as a surprise to the audience. But more often, it's better to invite people who are slightly famous but not so famous." Linda Evangelista nodded and said, "What about the others? I just happened to watch Survivor. Are we going to do the same thing as Survivor, and use a 2 versus 1 grouping system? In this aspect, you and your team will have to figure it out on your own. I can only give you some of my own ideas. It's definitely not possible to fight in groups. You have to know that every designer is a complete individual. They have their own style. Therefore, during the show you can fight in groups. However, most of the time, it's best to fight in single-person mode. Well, I think you can choose a theme for each episode, set a time for them to work on it, and judge according to their work. Then they will be eliminated one by one, and finally the winner will be. Well, the structure of each episode is roughly like this." Cindy Crawford said, "Eric, what's the reward for our winner? Is it also $1 million? That's definitely not possible. We're a niche program on a niche TV station, so we can only get 100,000 yuan. Isn't $100,000 too stingy? Do you think everyone has such a high income like you too? The average annual salary of Americans is less than $50,000. $100,000 is a huge sum of money for most people. In order to maintain enough authenticity, the contestants of the two shows in your hands must be strictly limited to the ordinary class. The best model is a young girl in a small town, and the designer can't be too professional. In addition, the final prize can't be just money. In addition to the prize money, the final prize of America's top model also needs to provide resources that the model needs to become famous. For example, a chance to appear on the cover of a top fashion magazine. This will be supported by the Hearst Group. In addition, a chance to sign a contract with a modeling agency. You can communicate with your agency about this. I think they will definitely not be stingy with this cooperation opportunity. What about me? What about me? Linda Evangelista asked. You'll also get a bonus of $100,000. Well, it's best if you have a chance to cooperate with a fashion company. You can contact them first. I'll also talk to LTD, Eric said, waving his hand and saying. In short, these are your own things. Don't think about getting too much help from me. I'm only responsible for checking the results of your work. Chapter 7:17. After talking for more than an hour, there was a knock on the door of the study. Eva Pakula poked her head in. Eric, Vicky asked me to ask you if you want to keep the guests for lunch? When Eric heard Virginia's name, he knew that she had instructed Eva to drive them away. He looked at his watch. It was almost 11 o'clock. Since Virginia didn't want the two girls to stay for lunch, he couldn't force them to stay. He said to Eva, No, we finished talking. Cindy and Linda can go back to New York. Oh, then I'll tell Vicky. Eva winked mischievously and retracted her head. The door was gently closed. In that case, you can go back first. I'll treat you to lunch when I'm free. After Eva left, Eric stood up and said, Cindy Crawford and Linda Evangelista certainly understood what had happened. If they were in his shoes, they felt that they would have done the same. They weren't too surprised, but they were definitely unhappy. After saying goodbye to Eric, Cindy Crawford and Linda Evangelista got into their respective cars and left Waterfront Manor. After a few minutes of shuttling through the quiet streets, they arrived at the center of East Hampton. Linda Evangelista saw Cindy Crawford parking her car in front of a restaurant and also stopped her car. The two girls walked into the restaurant with their respective bags. It was almost lunchtime, and the living room was already full of guests. Their temperament and appearance were very conspicuous, and they immediately attracted a lot of attention. Most of the guests just looked at them a few more times, and some people greeted them. Two casually dressed girls boldly came over. One of them said, Linda, Cindy, can you give us your autograph? Of course. The feeling of being the center of attention made Cindy Crawford feel better. She nodded happily, took the pen and paper from the girl's hand, quickly signed it, and handed it to Linda Evangelista next to her. While signing their names, the two girls did not stop talking. They chattered. I didn't expect you to live here. Jill even said that we might not meet any famous people here. Oh, we're here for a vacation. The white beach in East Hampton is really beautiful. It's a pity that it's a little cold now, so it's not suitable for swimming. When Linda Evangelista heard the girl's first sentence, her hand holding the pen paused. She quickly finished the last few strokes and returned the pen and paper to the two girls. However, she didn't have much interest in continuing to communicate with the two little fans in front of her. After a few simple words, the two women found a seat under the guidance of the waiter. Cindy Crawford took the menu from the waiter and looked at the menu that was even more expensive than the top restaurants in Manhattan. She curled her lips and ordered a few of the most expensive dishes, as if she was venting her anger. After the waiter left, Cindy Crawford complained. What do you mean we can just rush back to New York? Doesn't he know that it takes 2 hours to drive from East Hampton to Manhattan? We'll starve to death if we rush back. Listening to Cindy Crawford's envious and indignant tone, Linda Evangelista was not so depressed. She took out the document that Eric gave them from her satchel and leisurely flipped through it. She casually replied, Why didn't you dare to tell him just now? If you did, he would have been too embarrassed to drive us away. I'm too lazy to care. Cindy Crawford snorted softly and added without thinking, "She really thinks she's the mistress of the house just because she has a child." Linda Evangelista did not raise her head. She turned a page of the document and said to herself, "I have half a month to come up with a proposal, May to prepare, and the remaining 3 months to produce. I also have to squeeze time for the Autumn Fashion Week, followed by the Victoria's Secret show. I'm really worried that I'll be too busy." Cindy Crawford saw that lunch would not be served for a while. She also took out the document from her bag and said, "No one is forcing you to do this. If you say you don't want to do it, those little bitches will definitely cry and shout and throw themselves at you. Just don't regret it in the future. Look at Naomi Campbell's actions during this period. You'll know how much she regrets refusing to participate in the Victoria's Secret show last year." Linda Evangelista remembered that during this period, Naomi Campbell had tried to squeeze Tara Banks out of the Victoria's Secret show through her connections. She shook her head and said with some disdain, "I think she's completely wrong. Victoria's Secret Angel is a brand created by Williams. He's also a major shareholder of Ltd. No one will replace the Victoria's Secret spokesperson without his permission. Do you think she doesn't understand? It's just that she has no chance to get in touch with Williams. What's more, even if she does get in touch with him, it might not be useful. And she's too greedy. There are 6 themes in the Victoria's Secret show, but only 5 spokespersons. If it were me, I would fight for the opportunity to open for one theme. That way, I can maintain my status in the circle." Linda Evangelista was very envious of Cindy Crawford's shrewdness. Hearing this, she said, "Since you've thought about it so carefully, why don't you remind her?" "What can I get if I remind her? Friendship?" "Ah." Cindy Crawford laughed disdainfully. She glanced at the kitchen and turned her attention to the document in her hand. Linda Evangelista flipped through a few pages of the document and suddenly looked up. "Cindy, I have a good idea. What do you think?" "Oh, go ahead. If it's good, I won't hesitate to use it," Cindy Crawford replied casually as she lowered her head and thought about the guests she could invite in the future. She felt that with Linda Evangelina's IQ, it was unlikely that she would come up with a good idea. Linda Evangelista didn't care about Cindy Crawford's carelessness. She said excitedly, "You see, our shows will definitely be broadcast at the same time. My show needs models, and yours can't do without designers. Why don't we do a crossover episode? It'll definitely be a gimmick." "Well, that's a good idea," Cindy Crawford praised, but then shook her head. "I don't want to do a crossover with you. What if your show's ratings are not good and you drag me down?" Linda Evangelista said unhappily, "Hey, I'm talking about a serious matter. Besides, why can't you be the one dragging me down?" Cindy Crawford raised her chin and said, "Because it's impossible." "You're really self-righteous. You're wrong. This is confidence." "Forget it, I don't want to bicker with you." Linda Evangelista turned off the engine. After thinking for a while, she couldn't help but ask, "How much do you think we can get if we get a 10% share?" The production cost of last year's Victoria's Secret show was $20 million US. "I don't expect too much. As long as the profits of this show are not less than 1/10 of the Victoria's Secret show, that's enough." Linda Evangelista recalled the profit data of the Victoria's Secret show and said, "Then you only have $3 million US left. You've been busy for 5 months. That's so little." Cindy Crawford smiled and didn't explain anything to Linda Evangelista. The media always liked to brag about how much money top supermodels like them could make every year, but in fact, the difference between the media data and the real data was like heaven and earth. For example, some media reported that her income last year was $25 million US, but in fact, that was not the case. It was true that her income last year was $25 million US, but this data was like the operating income of a company. Revenue and profit were 2 completely different things. Among the $25 million US, $10 million US was the endorsement fee from Victoria's Secret. The other $15 million US was mainly from the several new advertising endorsement contracts she received from the Victoria's Secret show. These endorsements only required her to attend some activities on time. Most of the time, she could get the money by shooting a few commercials. Therefore, the starting price was far lower than Victoria's Secret's, but the average length of the contract was about 3 years. With these contracts in hand, she couldn't accept more endorsements in the next few years. The contract with Victoria's Secret was 5 years, with an average of $2 million a year. The remaining contracts were 3 years, with an average of $5 million a year. In total, her annual income was $7 million. But this was not the end. With her income level, she had to pay 35% of the income tax, and the brokerage company had to take 10% of the share. In the end, she only had $85 million, which was her real annual income. Moreover, the modeling world was changing very quickly. Even for a supermodel like her, her income would gradually decline as she grew older and her successors rose to prominence. Therefore, Cindy Crawford cared more about this job than Linda Evangelista, who was not very sensitive about money. She still clearly remembered that Eric had said that as long as the ratings of this reality show were good, it could continue to produce dozens of seasons. Dozens of seasons? Cindy Crawford didn't dare to hope for that. But as long as the show could continue to produce for 8 or 10 years, she could save a lot of money before the age of 40 and retire with dignity. Thinking about the future, Cindy Crawford inexplicably thought of the luxurious manor covering dozens of acres by the sea in East Hampton, as well as the little figures that she had secretly seen in the morning. She remembered that the guy in Forbes magazine had a net worth of $46.5 billion. Even if she maintained her current annual income of more than $3 million, she wouldn't be able to reach 1% of his personal wealth after 100 years of work. Cindy Crawford was speechless. She couldn't help but feel helpless. She murmured in a low voice, "Alas, I'd rather have a child." Linda Evangelista, who was sitting opposite her, heard her voice and suddenly looked up. "Cindy, what did you say?" Cindy Crawford looked puzzled. "Did I say it out loud?" Linda Evangelista nodded firmly. "You said it out loud, and this is the second time." Cindy Crawford's eyes flashed for a moment, but she soon calmed down. She lowered her head and continued to flip through the documents in her hand. She asked lazily, "What did I say?" "You know." "Oh, I forgot." Linda Evangelista threatened, "Be careful or I'll tell him about your thoughts." Cindy Crawford said indifferently, "Go ahead. Who knows if it's your thoughts or mine?" Linda Evangelista's eyes widened in shock. She subconsciously raised her voice and said, "My thoughts are too shameless. How can you accuse me?" Cindy Crawford pouted her lips and said, "Shut up. Do you want these people to laugh at us?" Linda Evangelista noticed that some guests were looking at them. She lowered her voice and said, "Anyway, I just heard it." "All right, it's up to you." Cindy Crawford shrugged nonchalantly. She really wasn't that worried. Such thoughts were like contagious demons, and she was certain that Linda Evangelista had been infected. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been so insistent on that small detail, as if she had to prove something. Almost everyone agreed that women's spending power was far greater than men's. Therefore, Lifetime TV had this kind of potential consumer base, because the TV station's advertising clients would definitely favor the female audience. The American cable TV market had been brewing for more than a decade, and was on the verge of exploding. This kind of drastic change in the industry was often the best time for monopolistic oligarchs to appear. Although there wasn't a dominant female TV station in the original universe, no one doubted that the cable TV market had this kind of potential. As long as they could seize the opportunity to enter the market first, it wasn't impossible to create a female TV station that was not inferior to ESPN. The most fundamental factor for a TV station's success was outstanding TV shows. Although they already had America's Top Model and Project Runway, the TV station couldn't rely only on reality shows to support the ratings. TV series were indispensable. Eric undoubtedly had a great advantage in this regard. While he was considering the 2 reality shows, he had already thought of a TV series that was very suitable for Lifetime TV. However, Lifetime TV's annual budget was only $100 million for the time being. Although Eric had high expectations for Lifetime TV, he couldn't rush it. If he invested too much in the early stages and caused losses, not only would it be very demoralizing, but it might also affect the next step of the development plan. Out of the $100 million budget, the 2 reality shows already took up $40 million. In addition, the TV station not only had to order a batch of TV shows to fill other broadcast slots, but also had to reserve enough marketing funds. Therefore, the remaining $60 million couldn't squeeze out the budget for another TV series. Of course, as long as the ratings of America's Top Model and Project Runway in the fall season met Eric's expectations, Lifetime TV's budget would definitely increase significantly. After Easter, Eric temporarily stopped paying attention to the Firefly Group and focused most of his energy on the negotiations for Firefly to invest in Sprint. On the other hand, the negotiations between Firefly and Hasbro about the toy peripherals were going very smoothly. Both parties had a very strong desire to cooperate and had already come up with a detailed proposal at the end of April. After Katzenberg signed the cooperation agreement with Hasbro on behalf of the Firefly Group, he wasn't in a hurry to leave New York. Instead, he relied on the next stage of Lifetime TV's development plan to lobby several major cable TV operators, hoping to get more subscribers for Lifetime TV before the fall season. Chapter 7:18. Throughout May, Eric and Chris had been working hard to get Firefly Investments to invest in Sprint, a telecommunications operator. The 2 parties had already finalized a rough transaction plan in early May. Sprint would issue 400 million shares to Firefly Investments in exchange for a $1.32 billion capital injection. After the transaction, Sprint's total share capital would be expanded to 4 billion shares. Firefly Investments would hold 10% of the shares and would obtain 2 board seats on Sprint's board of directors. As long as the transaction was successful, Sprint would also adopt Qualcomm's CDMA technology with the help of Firefly's investment. However, after the 2 parties drafted the transaction plan, the matter was far from over. Although the entry threshold for the telecommunications industry was gradually being relaxed, as an industry that was strictly regulated by any country, it still needed to go through layers of review to successfully enter. Firefly and Sprint first needed to submit the proposal to the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, FTC, for antitrust review. Firefly Investments not only owned Qualcomm, which was involved in mobile communications technology research and development, but also controlled Nokia, which produced mobile communications base stations and terminal equipment. If they successfully invested in Sprint, they would basically have access to the entire mobile communications industry chain. The suspicion of a monopoly was very obvious. If it were 10 years ago, this transaction plan would have been immediately rejected by the FTC after it was submitted. However, in recent years, the federal government continued to relax legal restrictions in the telecommunications industry, which made it possible for the transaction plan to be approved. After Eric and Chris personally attended several FTC hearings on the transaction and privately mobilized public relations to lobby, the FTC finally approved the transaction at the end of May. While dealing with the FTC, Firefly Investments and Sprint also submitted relevant applications to the Federal Trade Commission, SEC, and the Federal Communications Commission, FCC. After the FTC, which was the most unpredictable, passed, the remaining 2 departments were much simpler. Almost a week after the FTC approved the transaction plan, the SEC and the FCC approved the transaction application one after another. On May 26, the signing ceremony between Firefly Investments and Sprint was officially held at Sprint's headquarters in Manhattan. At the press conference after the signing ceremony, Firefly Investments and Sprint executives officially announced to the public that Sprint would engage in in-depth cooperation with Qualcomm to use CDMA technology to build a national mobile communications network. A month ago, after receiving $300 million in bond financing from Firefly, Verizon announced that it was joining the CDMA camp. At this time, the Sprint Group, which owned nearly half of the Class A and Class B mobile telecommunications licenses, announced its participation once again. This marked the end of the dispute over the U.S. mobile telecommunications technology standards. Not only did CDMA technology escape the fate of being completely abandoned, but it also successfully occupied more than half of the U.S. mobile telecommunications market. As soon as the press conference ended, The stock price of Qualcomm on the public market began to rise in a straight line. By the end of the day, the stock price had soared by 8% in a few hours. The price of each share easily broke through the $30 mark and reached $31.5. Compared with the stock price of about $17 at the end of last year, the market value of Qualcomm had risen by 85% in just half a year. It was only a matter of time before it doubled. The last time I went to San Diego, Qualcomm had just started to select the location for their communications equipment manufacturing factory. It would be at least the end of the year before they could start large-scale production. Although Sprint agreed to use CDMA technology, they can't wait for half a year. They decided to temporarily lay down the GSM network in Washington. In addition, Qualcomm originally planned to cooperate with Sony to build a factory, but I rejected the proposal. Even if they were to cooperate, the partner would definitely be Nokia. This is also a good time for Nokia to enter the US market. Qualcomm had licensed a full set of CDMA technology to Nokia before we took control of Nokia in 1991. Although Nokia focuses on GSM research and development, they still have some foundation in this field. They can also provide a group of professional management personnel for Qualcomm's equipment manufacturing factory. The next day, which happened to be Saturday, after a busy day yesterday, most of the things were finally finished. Chris brought Emily to East Hampton. However, the two quickly went into Eric's study to talk about business. Of course, the topic was still about Qualcomm. Chris was very clear that Eric's recent series of plans were mainly for Qualcomm. Eric leaned back in his chair and listened to Chris. He said, "When it comes to GSM and CDMA, I think that neither side can drive the other out of the market in a short period of time. Therefore, the integration of these two technologies is the best way to go." Just like the DVD format dispute this time, the two major DVD technology standard camps were very smart. They didn't waste another 8 to 10 years on R plus and R to determine the winner. Instead, they chose to support each other. The DVD standard had been set for some years. However, due to the lower cost of DVD piracy, several major Hollywood film studios had been trying to delay the launch of DVD. But after delaying for so long, it was impossible for them to delay any longer. With Sony's videotape lawsuit as an example, Hollywood could no longer hope to use lawsuits to stop the emergence of DVDs. After the summer break, the major DVD manufacturers will introduce DVD players. Chris also knew some information in this area. He said, "The standards held by the two major DVD technology camps are actually of the same generation, so it is not difficult to support each other. But GSM and CDMA are two completely different technology standards. It is basically impossible to integrate them." Eric said, "I am not talking about integration at the operator level, but integration at the terminal level. Nokia has GSM technology, and Qualcomm has CDMA technology. Both sides have a very deep technical accumulation in these two standards. Therefore, it is not difficult for us to launch a mobile phone that can support GSM and CDMA networks at the same time." Mobile phones with dual and full network connectivity that supported multiple network standards were very common in the future. But in 1995, the new generation of digital communication technology had just become widespread. The major technology camps were all thinking about how to squeeze each other out of the market. They did not consider coexistence or even integration at all. Therefore, multi-network mobile phones were definitely a very novel concept. Chris's eyes suddenly lit up. He said, "Eric, this is a great idea. I think, why don't we hold a conference call tomorrow to discuss this matter with Yoma Alala and Owen Jacob? A mobile phone that supports GSM and CDMA networks at the same time will definitely not have a big market in Europe. However, the coexistence of GSM and CDMA networks in North America has been confirmed. This mobile phone will definitely be very promising. You arrange it. Jurassic Park 2 will be released on June 2nd. I can probably stay in New York for another week," Eric replied. He also planned to have a detailed discussion with Nokia's CEO, Yoma Alala. Nokia was the first communication equipment manufacturer to bet on GSM technology. This was also the key to its rapid rise in recent years. Although it did not completely monopolize CDMA technology patents like Qualcomm, Nokia had the most patents in GSM technology among the world's major communication equipment manufacturers. A few months ago, when the news of Firefly investing in Qualcomm came out, Yoma Alala had doubts about Eric's approach in an email. In his opinion, banning Qualcomm's CDMA technology was more in line with Nokia's interests. Now, not only did Eric not do that, but he also strongly supported CDMA technology to seize half of the mobile communication market in the United States. Even if Yoma Alala did not react strongly on the surface, he would definitely have a knot in his heart. Although Eric had already explained his intentions to him on the phone and in emails, more communication would definitely be beneficial. Only by maintaining sufficient communication and understanding each other's intentions could Eric rest assured that his companies would be managed by his managers. He could also save more time to do other things. Chris habitually took out a small memo from his shirt pocket and solemnly wrote down this matter. He then said to Eric, "This matter is resolved. I think we should talk about Yahoo. I have been in contact with Ian and the others recently. I understand their general idea." Eric nodded and said, "The original equity incentive contract expired this year." The Firefly investment team had begun to evaluate the work of Yahoo's main management in order to determine the share of equity rewards they could receive. Eric's original plan was to launch Yahoo's IPO plan after this equity incentive plan ended. But recently, several senior executives unanimously hoped that Eric could postpone Yahoo's listing date. Their reasons were quite good. The capital market was extremely profitable. Once Yahoo went public, the company would have to face performance pressure and give up its current stable development strategy. Under the repeated persuasion of Yahoo's management, Eric also began to seriously consider this issue. A few years ago, Eric's original idea was to go public in 1995. When the dot-com bubble quickly inflated, his Yahoo shares would have passed the lockup period. He could take advantage of Yahoo's inflated share price to cash out a large amount of money from the capital market. At the end of the day, Eric's original plan had a very obvious opportunistic mentality. Subconsciously, he only wanted to cash out and leave, instead of running Yahoo well. After a few years of mental stability, Eric also realized that if he maintained this mentality, his career would definitely hit a bottleneck one day. Chris saw Eric's expression and asked, "So, Eric, what do you think now? What about you? You also agree with their idea, right?" Eric smiled and asked back. Chris nodded. "The capital market is very keen on investing in the internet market. That's why I think we should postpone our listing for a few years and wait for Yahoo to have a brighter future." Eric recalled that in his original space-time, the Nasdaq index started to rise in 1998. Within 2 years, it had increased from 1,000 points to 5,000 points. If Yahoo was listed after 1998, the initial public offering would be several times more than what it is now. But under strict financial regulations, the funds will be used for Yahoo's development and will not belong to Eric. Although he can use some methods to transfer some of the funds out, there are legal risks. It is safer than selling his shares. Cash out, cash out, cash out. Eric kept repeating this phrase in his heart for a few years and suddenly realized that he does not lack money. No matter how much he sells, he will still need to invest it. Eric was enlightened and said to Chris, "All right, we will postpone the IPO. But no matter what, we should complete the IPO before the contract with Microsoft takes effect." "Of course." Chris relaxed and smiled. If Eric insisted, he really didn't know how to persuade him. Speaking of which, Microsoft's Windows 95 will be officially released in August. But I think you should already be using this operating system. Microsoft's share price has been rising recently. The market seems to be very optimistic about this new operating system. Although Microsoft's Windows 95 will be released at the end of August, many beta versions had been released. Pirated disks are also widely available outside the US. Eric used this operating system, which he was familiar with in his previous life. I think this operating system will allow Microsoft to monopolize the operating system market. That's why we will be at odds with Microsoft for the next few years. Microsoft had established their dominance in the operating system market and will surely enter the internet market. I am not even sure if Bill Gates will tear up the contract. After all, Microsoft might not want to wait until 1999. I think Microsoft is starting to get restless now. Chris laughed and said, Steve called me a few days ago and said Microsoft had contacted him. They hope he can leave Yahoo and join Microsoft's Internet department. Steve is Steve Mitnick, who is in charge of Yahoo's technology department. He is Chris's best friend in university. In Eric's opinion, the main managers of Yahoo were Ian Neer, Jeff Locke, Steve Mitnick, and Tina Brown. Among the four of them, Steve Mitnick was the most important to Yahoo because he was responsible for almost all of Yahoo's core technology research and development of several major Internet products. If he was poached, Yahoo would definitely be in turmoil for a long time. Therefore, this news shocked Eric. He asked subconsciously, really? Chris nodded. Seeing the worried look on Eric's face, he smiled and said, But you don't have to worry. I know Steve's character very well. Since he called me, it means that he definitely won't leave Yahoo. Of course, Eric couldn't completely relax. He asked, What about the others? Chapter 719. Chris is more relaxed than Eric. Based on the initial estimates, Ian and Steve will get 3 million shares each. Jeff Locke will get 2 million shares, and Tina Brown will get 1 million shares. Based on Wall Street's valuation of Yahoo at $5 billion, they will become billionaires with this equity incentive plan. The chances of the four of them leaving Yahoo is very low. Other than them, there will be a group of middle to low-level managers and top employees who will get up to 200,000 shares and 10,000 shares. Some of these people might be poached, but it will not affect Yahoo. Yahoo's share capital is about 100 million shares. Based on Wall Street's valuation of Yahoo at $5 billion, each share is worth $50. After this equity incentive plan is implemented, Yahoo will have more than a dozen millionaires. It is not difficult for web portals to imitate other web portals. If Yahoo wants to stay in the lead for a long time, they need to invest heavily in R&D and set up patent barriers. They also need to prevent core employees from leaving. This is the reason why Eric set up this equity incentive plan. If he cannot recruit these top management and top employees with a large sum of money, once these experienced people leave Yahoo, they will be able to replicate Yahoo's model with the help of competitors. Although Chris is not worried about Microsoft trying to poach these top employees, Eric does not think so. Microsoft must have known about Yahoo's internal equity incentive plan, but they still tried to test Steve Mitnick. This meant that they were prepared to pay a high price for it. Yahoo's equity incentive plan would be finalized at the end of July, but there was no free lunch in this world. These shares were not only a reward for the past few years of hard work of Yahoo's management, but it also meant that the employees who received the rewards would be bound to Yahoo. According to the original agreement, if the employee who received the equity award chose to resign within 5 years, not only would the shares in their hands be redeemed by Yahoo at the price of the equity award, but the resigning employee would also be restricted from doing any internet-related work for the next 5 years, or they would face a huge compensation claim. The internet industry is developing at a month-to-month pace. Leaving the industry for 5 years means being eliminated. Eric believed that July would be a very important watershed for Yahoo. The internet industry had just started to rise, and there were countless opportunities to become rich overnight. Therefore, before the equity incentive plan was officially implemented at the end of July, there would definitely be a group of Yahoo employees who would choose to give up on the lucrative equity rewards and join other companies, or even start their own companies. After thinking about it for a while, Eric gradually realized that even if he couldn't stop the loss of employees, he could use Yahoo's position as the industry leader to do other things. Yahoo was now the target of many emerging companies in the internet industry. Some of Yahoo's internet products had even started to follow the trend, but there was no one who could threaten Yahoo's position in the industry. Since Yahoo's every move could be studied and even imitated, then Yahoo could try to lead the latecomers astray. The portal model definitely wouldn't last long, but just like the internet bubble in the next few years, Yahoo could also overpackage the portal model on the surface and portray a bright future that far exceeded its actual development potential. In this way, several major competitors would focus their energy on the portal business. On the other hand, Yahoo could choose the right path in private. Many examples in Liu Zhou's memory had proven that the key factor for the rapid rise and fall of a giant company was not funding or technology, but strategy. If Yahoo couldn't choose the right path, then even if they burned $10 billion a year, it would be useless. In Liu Zhou's previous life, when Nokia was kicked out of the mobile phone market by Apple, they still invested more in R&D than Apple, but in the end, they could only withdraw from the mobile phone market. After sorting out the general idea, Eric unknowingly wrote a line of words on the notebook in front of him with the pencil in his hand. Chris was used to Eric's sudden thinking, so he didn't disturb him. When he saw Eric writing on the notebook, he asked curiously, "What are you writing?" Eric handed the notebook to Chris, and Chris saw 8 completely unfamiliar characters on it. These are Chinese characters? Chris, on the other hand, knew that Eric could speak Chinese. He had always thought that it was a miracle, but he didn't want to get to the bottom of it. After all, Eric was a miracle. He simply put Eric in the category of a genius. Eric nodded and explained. In the ancient East, there was a rebellious hooligan. During the critical period of his career, he used these characters and successfully became an emperor. What does hooligan have to do with being an emperor? Is this a fable? But why is it so short? Chris asked a few questions. Eric took the notebook back and smiled. Your questions can't be explained in a few words. If you are interested, I will explain it to you. Let's talk about the plan I just came up with. Isn't there a Yahoo Technology Alliance and Advertising Alliance conference in Boston? I've decided to bring this matter forward to early July and try to make it as grand as possible. Well, how about this? We'll hold another Yahoo online product launch during this period and use TV broadcasts to promote our upcoming Yahoo Pay payment tools and other products. Eric, I don't quite get it. Yahoo's every move is being watched by many people, and it won't do us any good if we make it big. So why are you doing this? Because... Eric revealed a naughty smile as he tapped on the notebook and said, I want to lead the entire industry astray. Just when Chris was about to continue asking, there was a knock on the door. Joanna walked in, and just when she was about to say something, she noticed the naughty smile on Eric's face and asked, What are you up to now? Retracting his expression, Eric shook his head and replied, No, Chris and I are currently discussing a charity project. We intend to donate some money to the African bison to help them control their reproduction. The migration of tens of millions of African bison every year is too much of a fuss. Joanna knew that Eric was talking nonsense, so she rolled her eyes and said, All right, let's talk about it in the afternoon. It's time for lunch. Seeing that Joanna had left, Chris couldn't help laughing. African bison. How did you jump from the internet to this? Xiaxia hid the remote last night, and we were forced to watch a documentary on the African savannah for an hour. Eric smiled as he stood up. Let's go for lunch first. We'll talk about it later. Chris stood up and smiled. Xiaxia is so smart, and I feel that she will be as outstanding as you in the future. It's not good to be too outstanding. Eric waved his hand and continued. Her starting point in life is higher than all the children in the world. I'm worried that she won't have any goals in the future, and will want to rule the world. Huh. The two of them chatted and laughed as they walked out of the study. As soon as they reached the living room, they saw Hawaii's little figure running in through the door in her little boots. Her eyes were wide open, and her face was filled with a rare look of panic. Seeing Eric, the little girl immediately threw herself at him. Baby, what's wrong? Eric hurriedly stopped in his tracks and hugged Hawaii tightly in his arms. He felt his daughter clinging to him like a sloth. Just as he opened his mouth to speak, he recalled the expression on Hawaii's face just now. He immediately understood something and looked towards the door. Chris was a little confused. He only felt that it was the first time he saw such a rich expression on Hawaii's face. Before the little girl could answer, the answer came from outside the door. Hey, Xiaxia. Why did you run away when you saw Auntie Drew? I'm so sad. I won't read you bedtime stories in the future. Along with this voice, the little girl in a light yellow trench coat walked in. When she saw Eric, she rushed over and hugged him intimately. She even kissed Hawaii's cheek forcefully on Eric's body before greeting Chris. At noon, everyone chose to have a barbecue. At this moment, the aroma of barbecued meat could be smelled in the living room. Eric carried Hawaii and continued to walk out. He said to the little girl, "You've become Xiaxia's natural enemy now. Don't read horror novels to scare her anymore." Although he said that, Eric's tone did not sound too reproachful. Hawaii's IQ was too high. Both he and Joanna were worried that their daughter's little brain was only left with logic and lacked emotions. The little girl's unintentional prank back then had made Hawaii more like a normal child. Eric knew that the little girl would never really hurt his daughter. So after discovering this matter, he did not take it to heart. The little girl made a face at Hawaii, who had secretly glanced at her when she heard her father's words. Seeing the little girl immediately bury her head in her father's shoulder, she giggled and held Eric's arm. "Okay. By the way, Hanks is also in New York. He didn't come over. He just asked me to say hello to you." While Eric was busy investing in Sprint, the North American film summer had quietly started. The opening film of the summer this year was Fox's Die Hard 3, which was released on May 19th. This sequel cost Fox $90 million, but the response during the test screening was not very good. With the aggressive Jurassic Park 2, Batman Returns and other blockbusters coming in, the North American box office had little hope of exploding. Fortunately, Bruce Willis, like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone, had a very strong box office appeal overseas. Therefore, Fox decided to release Die Hard 3 in North America in advance, so that they could arrange for overseas distribution during the summer. Die Hard 3 did not disappoint. The box office in the first week was only $29 million, which was almost a bleak result for a $90 million production cost. Fox had decided to shelve the series for a long time. Yesterday, May 26th, was the second week of the summer. The Warner film Fair Game, which Eric had accidentally interfered with, was released. The cost of this action film was $50 million, and the female lead was changed from Cindy Crawford to Claudia Schiffer. It was said that the script had been greatly revised, but no one knew how it would turn out. Eric did not pay attention to the box office for the time being. Forrest Gump was set to be released on June 9th. Eric handed the film over to Flower Pictures for distribution. Drew came to New York to lead the crew on a promotional tour. In the words of his previous life, it was a road show. "Help me say hello to him too." The three of them walked out of the villa. Eric handed the Hawaiian to Joanna, rolled up his sleeves and walked to the barbecue grill to help. He continued to say to the girl beside him, "When are you leaving New York?" "Hanks is filming the Reno show today. We'll go to Washington tomorrow, and the next stop will be Miami. Then we'll go back to the West Coast, starting from Seattle." The girl told Eric about her itinerary, picked up a skewer of chicken wings from the table, and stood beside him to barbecue. She said, "Eric, Amy found out that Kirk Cotterian has recently started contacting MGM again. One of her friends saw Kirk Cotterian and Frank Marcheso at a party last week." Eric's hand that was flipping the barbecue paused. He then shook his head and smiled. "Let's eat first. Don't worry about her. I'll call Frank Marcheso tonight. You just focus on the release of Forrest Gump." "Okay." The girl nodded. She was just reminding Eric. As long as Eric knew what to do, she wouldn't worry about these things. For the current MGM, in addition to the 007 series, several other profitable film series such as Breakin' Girls and Resident Evil were under Eric's control. The copyright of Wonder Night at the Museum, which was about to be released in the summer, was in the hands of Flower Pictures. Without Eric's approval, Credit Lyonnais wouldn't be able to sell MGM for a good price. As for Kirk Cotterian, the casino tycoon, Eric would definitely not allow him to enter Hollywood again. After lunch, Eric and Chris discussed in detail the plan to use Yahoo to mislead other competitors. The current internet environment belonged to the era of Internet 1.0. In this period, users had just come into contact with the internet. They were both confused and curious about all the information on the internet. Therefore, portals that acted as content guides seemed promising on the surface. But in fact, for users, this period was only the initial stage of users' understanding of the internet. As they became more and more familiar with the internet environment, the attraction of portals that could only provide them with customized content would be greatly weakened. Users would begin to have various personalized needs. Therefore, after the internet content accumulated in the 1.0 era and became very rich, the 2.0 era of the internet that satisfied the personalized needs of users gradually began. Although portals were not completely eliminated, they were reduced to little value. Web products such as search engines that provided users with information retrieval needs and blogs that satisfied users' social needs began to flourish. What Eric wanted to do was to use the media resources of Firefly Group and Yahoo to expand the development prospects of portals as much as possible through publicity. This would trap the attention of the main competitors on the portal business. Then, while maintaining Yahoo's position in the 1.0 era as much as possible, he would make arrangements for the 2.0 era in advance. Yahoo had temporarily canceled its IPO plan and did not need to disclose any details in the next few years. Therefore, this plan was very feasible. In the process of blowing this brilliant bubble, even if some people could stay awake, unless Eric was unlucky enough to encounter a difficult opponent like Microsoft, Yahoo had enough power to recruit or destroy these sober people in advance. Chapter 720. During the weekend, Eric and Chris discussed the development of the portal in detail. On Monday, after a conference call on the cooperation between Nokia and Qualcomm at Firefly's investment headquarters, Chris personally went to Boston to start the layout. It was already May 29th, and the release date of Firefly's first blockbuster, Jurassic Park, was set for June 2nd. Eric only needed to rush back to Los Angeles before that to attend the premiere, so he could stay in New York for a few more days. May was the month for the promotion and ordering of new TV series. Countless producers and TV stations gathered in New York to promote or buy new TV shows. Firefly had Survivor, Emergency Room Stories, and Friends under its banner. Therefore, they were very calm when it came to selecting new shows. The TV department put a lot of effort into the upcoming expansion of Lifetime TV. In addition to America's Top Model and Project Runway, that were about to start production, Lifetime TV had also ordered a high-quality female workplace TV series and a few TV movies at the TV show promotion event in May. At the same time, Lifetime TV had also made a new arrangement for their TV shows based on the series' distribution plan. Eric's focus was still on the two reality shows, America's Top Model and Project Runway. The two reality shows had been in preparation for a month and a half. In April, Cindy Crawford and Linda Evangelista came up with a detailed production plan with the help of the producers of Survivor. Throughout May, the two were busy preparing for the show's production and selecting contestants. At this time, all the preliminary work was nearing completion. This is the official competition venue for the contestants. According to the script, I will announce the competition content here at the beginning of each episode. In the second half of the show, the contestants will also show their production results here. The designers will sit in your seats and enjoy the fashion show with the judges on the other side. In addition, there is a lounge in the back which can provide some footage of the contestants during the beginning of the competition and the waiting period. ABC's studio in New York was built into a simple fashion show, but there was no audience. There was only a pocket-sized catwalk with a few chairs on both sides. Linda Evangelista was standing on top of the catwalk to Eric and the others, who were sitting in the audience. This was also Eric's last job in New York. After confirming this, he would return to Los Angeles. Linda Evangelista explained for a few minutes, then looked at the audience, waiting for Eric to speak. Eric sat with Emily Brighton and Ann Sweeney, as well as some other assistants and attendants. Cindy Crawford also sat next to Emily. For the demonstration, several special judges and producers in charge of Project Runway sat on the other side of the catwalk. Ltd will sponsor these two reality shows and obtain a portion of the advertisement placement. Ann Sweeney was the president of AE Television Network, a 35-year-old brown-haired woman. Ann Sweeney was originally in charge of Disney TV. After confirming the expansion plan of Lifetime TV, Katzenberg transferred Ann Sweeney here to be in charge of this matter. Eric had been following up on the preliminary production plan since the end of April. At this time, he was just doing a final check to make sure that all the details were flawless, so there was not much of a problem. Eric whispered a few words to Anne Sweeney and Emily. He looked up at Linda Evangelista and said, "Linda, is the catwalk under your feet made of wood?" Linda Evangelista was stunned. She stepped on the catwalk with her leather boots, making a sound of wood hitting wood. She nodded and said, "Yes." Eric pointed at the screen at the beginning of the catwalk and smiled. "Then walk around and let me see." Linda Evangelista was a little confused, but she obediently walked behind the screen and walked out with cat-like steps. Then there was a series of muffled sounds in the catwalk. Before Linda Evangelista finished her one-way walk, everyone had already noticed the problem. The sound of leather boots hitting the wooden catwalk was almost like noise. If the audience suddenly heard this sound during the show, it would definitely be very strange. When she reached the end of the catwalk, Linda Evangelista was too embarrassed to continue walking. She walked softly to her previous position and said with embarrassment, "Eric, I didn't think of this. We will replace this catwalk as soon as possible." Eric nodded and said to Emily and Anne, "I have no problem here. What about you?" Emily shook her head. She was mainly here to see the details of Ltd's product placement. She was not in a position to criticize the production of the show. Annie Sweeney asked a few more questions in a row until Linda Evangelista looked like she couldn't handle it anymore. Only then did she reluctantly let her go for Eric's sake. This female executive, who had jumped from Fox to ABC a few years ago, was also ambitious at this time. She wanted to rely on Lifetime TV to make some achievements and reach the level of Hollywood women such as Shirley Lansing and Amy Pascal. The former president of AETV Network was from the Hearst Group. After getting the controlling stake, Katzenberg adjusted the position and transferred Anne Sweeney to the Hearst Group. The reason was that a woman could better control the essence of a female TV station. Of course, everyone knew the actual situation. Eric also agreed with Katzenberg's decision. Although there was not much information about Anne Sweeney in his memory, Eric vaguely remembered that Anne Sweeney had directed a very famous TV series called Desperate Housewives. From this point of view, she had a lot in common with Amy Pascal, who liked female movies. It was indeed suitable to let her be in charge of Lifetime TV, which focused on female audiences. It took them the whole morning to walk around the main shooting locations of Project Runway and listen to Linda Evangelista personally explain the process. The activity in the afternoon was, of course, America's Top Model. Both reality shows had chosen Midtown Manhattan as their main filming location. Even the contestants' apartments were only one street apart. Therefore, it didn't take a lot of effort to walk around. At 5:30 p.m., all the work was finished. Emily and Sweeney and the others got off work and went home. Eric was stopped by Cindy Crawford. "Eric, are you free tonight? How about having dinner together?" Cindy Crawford said as she stepped forward and held Eric's arm intimately. Linda Evangelista finished packing her things and walked out of a dressing room. She saw this scene and curled her lips. She walked to Eric and said with a smile, "Eric, since you want to have dinner, why don't I join you?" Eric joked, "If I take you two to the restaurant, I'll be killed by people's eyes. Then let's go to my place. My cooking skills are not bad, and we can continue to talk about America's Top Model." "I feel that there are many things that I didn't do well enough," Cindy Crawford said. When Eric wasn't paying attention, she threw a threatening look at Linda Evangelista, as if saying, "If you continue to cause trouble, I will punish you." Linda Evangelista originally wanted to tease her a little, but Cindy Crawford's look made her very unhappy. She stepped forward provocatively and took Eric's other arm, saying, "Then let's go to Cindy's place. We haven't met for a long time." Cindy Crawford couldn't help but stretch out her hand from behind Eric and gently pinch Linda Evangelista's ribs. "Ah, it hurts." Linda Evangelista cried out in pain and immediately became teary. She complained to Eric, "Eric, Cindy pinched me." It took 2 hours to drive back to East Hampton from Manhattan. Eric had originally planned to stay in the city. Now that a beauty invited him, of course, it would be impolite to refuse. He reached out and put his arm around Linda Evangelista's waist and patted her comfortingly. Well, let's go to Cindy's place. If you're going, let's go together. Ask her to cook for us. If you don't, I'll treat you to dinner next time in New York. Okay, I'll listen to you, Linda Evangelista said in a tender voice. Her voice wasn't a baby's voice. It was slightly hoarse, but it had the naivety of a teenage girl. It was very charming. Hearing Linda Evangelista's words, Cindy Crawford could only glare at her, but she could not refute Eric's decision. They went downstairs to the parking lot and squeezed into Cindy Crawford's car. Cindy Crawford's apartment was in the Upper East Side. Although it was not far, it happened to be after work, so it took about 10 minutes to drive there. Realizing that her plan would definitely be ruined by Linda Evangelista, Cindy Crawford decisively focused on America's Top Model. While driving, she said to Eric, "Eric, what do you think of our preparation?" "It's all good. I'm looking forward to seeing the results of your work." After a tiring day, Eric did not have much energy to talk about this. He just gave a simple answer. In fact, in the process of following up, he had a very deep evaluation of the two shows. America's Top Model, which Cindy Crawford was in charge of, had a more imaginative format. There were a lot of interesting details set up. She also paid a lot of attention to the interaction between the host and the contestants, and she had more personal appearances. Comparatively speaking, Project Runway's format was relatively fixed. Each episode was 43 minutes, divided into several fixed program modules, and focused more on showing the contestants' abilities. Eric was quite satisfied with the results of their work. He couldn't say which one was better or worse. Besides, he didn't want the two shows to be exactly the same. Linda Evangelista listened attentively. Seeing that Eric did not go into too much detail, she thought of something else and asked, "Eric, the second season of Survivor just ended. I heard that the viewership of the final episode hit 50 million. How much money can ABC make from this show?" Eric shook his head and said with a smile, "This is an internal secret of the company, so I can't tell you. However, as long as the show in your hands can reach 10% of Survivor's level, it will be enough to fill up your little pockets." In fact, Eric was not very clear about the specific revenue of the second season of Survivor. Now that the second season had just finished airing, there was only preliminary advertising revenue data. According to ABC's statistics, the average advertising revenue of the second season of Survivor had reached $27 million per episode, and the advertising revenue for a single season was more than $350 million. The production cost of each episode of Survivor was only about $5 million. After the later video distribution and syndication, Firefly could earn at least 10 times more. Chapter 721. Early in the morning, in a high-rise apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan next to the East River, Linda Evangelista was standing by the kitchen counter, cutting an apple leisurely. She was only wearing a tight black tank top and denim hot pants, with a Walkman on her waist. Her tall and slender body swayed gently to the music coming from the headphones. Occasionally, she would hum a few times. She seemed to be in a good mood. After cutting the apple, she turned around to get salad dressing from the fridge, only to see Cindy Crawford at the door of the kitchen. Her body was leaning against the door frame, and her thick brown hair was loose. Her eyes were gloomy, like a witch. "Ah, you scared me." Linda Evangelista noticed the expression on Cindy Crawford's face. She subconsciously stepped back and leaned against the fridge door. After a moment of panic, she quickly took off her headphones, pretending to be calm. She giggled as if nothing had happened and said, "Good morning, Cindy." Cindy Crawford crossed her arms in front of her chest and looked up and down at Linda Evangelista. Her voice was still gloomy as she said, "This is my tank top." "Aha, we have the same figure. Hee, very suitable." Cindy Crawford looked down and said, "My hot pants." Linda Evangelista waved her small hands and said, "Oh, a little fat, but it's okay." "And my Walkman." Linda Evangelista felt that Cindy Crawford was like a female leopard on the verge of exploding. She shrank her neck and said, You can't be so stingy. Next time you come to my house, you can use my things." Cindy Crawford raised the corner of her mouth and walked into the kitchen. Linda Evangelista realized that something was wrong. She was about to dodge when she was pressed against the fridge door. Cindy Crawford had a good habit of working out for a long time. Although the two of them had similar figures, she was much stronger than Linda. Linda was pressed against the refrigerator door by one of her arms. Linda struggled a few times but to no avail. "Of course I don't care about these things." Cindy Crawford stared at Linda and said, "But why do you have to cause trouble and ruin my business?" Linda Evangelista stuttered. "I am doing this for your own good. We drank last night." "Yes, we drank. I heard that a child conceived after drinking is very likely to be an idiot." Cindy Crawford picked up the small pot that was used to boil milk and shook it fiercely. "Believe it or not, I'll beat you into an idiot right now. You were clearly causing trouble last night." "I didn't," Linda retorted guiltily, but she didn't dare to look at Cindy directly. She turned her head slightly, and her gaze fell on the soup pot that Cindy was waving. For some reason, his little sweetheart, who had been scared witless by Cindy's sudden transformation into the Dark Queen, inexplicably calmed down when she saw the pot of soup. She even found it somewhat funny and laughed out loud. Hee. Cindy slightly tightened her grip and became even angrier. "You still dare to laugh?" After laughing, Linda became a little bolder and said, "Cindy, let go of me. Otherwise, when Eric wakes up, I can't guarantee that I won't say anything." Cindy subconsciously loosened her arm a little, but she immediately exerted more force. She waved the small pot in her right hand and threatened, "I don't care whether you want to eat this or not, but if you dare to smash the pot, I'll really teach you a lesson." Okay, I won't say anything." Linda Evangelista put her hands together and begged for mercy. She didn't dare to really provoke Cindy. Being hit by the small pot would definitely hurt. Seeing that she had given in, Cindy also stopped and let go of her arm. When Cindy let go of her, Linda rubbed her chest and sniffled. She stared at Cindy's mouth and teased, "I think the most important thing for you to do now is to brush your teeth." After venting her anger, the little flame in Cindy's heart that was about to be extinguished jumped up again after hearing Linda's words. She remembered that at the critical moment last night, her bad friend suddenly pressed the back of her head, and she became even angrier. If it weren't for her, she might have succeeded. "Yes, but before we brush our teeth, we should be intimate with each other," Cindy said as she threw the small pot of soup in her hand to the side. She rushed forward and grabbed Linda's head, which was about to dodge, with both hands at lightning speed. Linda Evangelista realized what Cindy wanted to do and struggled hard. "What are you doing?" "Stop, Cindy, I was wrong, I woo." As soon as Eric woke up and walked out of the bedroom, he heard the woman struggling. He quickly followed the sound and happened to see Cindy kissing Linda on the refrigerator door. Standing at the door and admiring for a while, Eric said with a smile, "Hey babies, don't you think it's a waste of resources?" Hearing Eric's voice, Cindy Crawford let go of Linda Evangelista. Linda spat a few times at the sink and quickly rushed out of the kitchen to the bathroom. Cindy Crawford quickly combed her messy hair and regained her charming appearance. With a charming smile on her face, she said to Eric, "Good morning, Eric." "Good morning." Eric pointed at the door where Linda Evangelista disappeared. "What are you doing?" "Oh, she wants to taste yogurt." Cindy Crawford shrugged happily, but suddenly realized something and rushed out of the kitchen, shouting, "Hey Linda, I have spare toothbrushes here. You're not allowed to use my toothbrush." After a while, breakfast was ready. It was already 9 o'clock in the morning. Eric sat down at the table with milk and a plate. He spread out today's newspaper in front of him and read it while eating breakfast. A few minutes later, Cindy Crawford and Linda Evangelista came in with their breakfast. The two women had been in the bathroom for a long time. Eric had already washed up and started to prepare his breakfast, but they hadn't come out yet. During this time, Eric roughly understood what he had seen at the beginning. When Linda Evangelista sat down, she felt that the Walkman was still attached to her waist. She took it off and put it on the table. She picked up the cutlery and picked up the fruit salad on the plate. When she noticed the newspaper in front of Eric, she asked curiously, "Eric, what are you reading?" "Last week's box office statistics," Eric answered casually. "Oh, I remember." Linda Evangelista suddenly became interested. She looked at Cindy Crawford and said, "Fair Game was released last Friday. Did it win the box office?" When Cindy Crawford heard this, she looked up at Eric with a complicated expression. Eric looked at Cindy, shook his head, and said, "No, the first place is Universal's Ghost Horse and Fairies." "Oh, then it must be second place, right?" Linda asked again, looking at Cindy with a hint of schadenfreude. Eric shook his head again. "The second place is Fox's Die Hard 3. "Ah, then forget it, I'll see for myself." Linda wanted to ask more, but she quickly shook her head and reached out to grab the newspaper. She skimmed through the eye-catching table in the entertainment section and exclaimed, "Wow, why is it so low? It's only 6.8 million, and it's ranked 6th. This is a new film." No one said that the audience must like a new film. Eric glanced at Cindy and said to Linda. He inadvertently glanced at the Walkman that Linda had just put on the table. He fixed his gaze and reached out to take the exquisite black music player. He rubbed it in his hand. When Cindy Crawford heard the name Fair Game, she was worried. The female lead of this film should have been her. If the box office was successful, it meant that she had lost a chance to become a first-tier actress in Hollywood. Hearing Linda Evangelista report the box office data, he was finally relieved. The first weekend box office was $6.8 million, ranked 6th. It was not a success. Cindy Crawford secretly sighed and looked up. She noticed that Eric was playing with her Walkman thoughtfully. She was a little confused, but she still asked the question she was most concerned about. "Eric, did you know that this film would fail?" Eric's gaze did not leave the Walkman. He shook his head and said casually, "I'm not that amazing. It's just that after Joe Silver told me about this project, I felt that there was a big problem with the script. I heard that they made a lot of adjustments to the project, so the result now has nothing to do with me." "How can it have nothing to do with you? Claudia Schiffer is the female lead," Linda said. "I heard that you helped her get it." Eric said, "Claudia doesn't lack film contracts. She doesn't need me to help her get it. It's just that Warner offered a higher price." "Then it's terrible now. The production cost is $50 million, Linda continued. The first weekend box office is only $6.8 million. How much will the final box office be? About $30 million. It's not too bad. It might even break even later. But next week, Jurassic Park 2 will be released. The other films will basically be eliminated." Eric said it matter-of-factly. The two women did not doubt that Jurassic Park 2 had the potential to dominate the box office. They did not refute him. Cindy Crawford was still a little conflicted about what happened in the past. She asked, "Eric, why do you think this film failed?" Eric answered, "I just glanced at the reviews. It's mainly because the completion rate of the story was too low. Although Joe Silver made some adjustments to the script, this problem arose during the production process. The director wasted too much time on the foreshadowing of the plot. As a result, the story just started to take a big turn and ended in a hurry. This situation should be due to budget constraints. The director did not finish filming what he wanted to film." Although he did not watch the film, Eric could roughly guess that the problem of this film should be similar to Michael Bay's Escape from Cloning Island, that failed miserably in the box office in his previous life. It gave people the feeling that it ended before it even started. One of the big drawbacks of the perfect North American film business system was that, in most cases, if it was a really bad film, the audience would not buy it just because it was a big production and a big star. It would flop if it was supposed to. At this time, Cindy Crawford was also glad that she had escaped a disaster. If she had acted in this film, even if the blame for the film's failure was not on her, her acting career in Hollywood would definitely have ended before it even started. However, she immediately felt some bitterness in her heart. If she acted in this film, she might ruin her acting career, but this matter definitely wouldn't affect Claudia Schiffer too much. With the resources in Eric's hands, he could just casually give her the female lead role in a big production, and she would definitely be able to easily regain her popularity. Cindy Crawford casually ate the breakfast in front of her. She noticed that Eric still had no intention of putting down the Walkman. She asked curiously, "Eric, is there a problem with this Walkman?" "No, it's perfect. It's a work of art." "Then you..." I suddenly thought of something, Eric vaguely explained. He looked up at the two girls and asked, "What are you two doing after breakfast?" Cindy Crawford replied, "My team and I are going to the Hudson River to view the scenery today. We are going to record some VCR for the contestants. I don't have much work to do today. The production team is going to purchase some props. I don't need to show up." "Well, I can go and replace the runway from yesterday," Linda Evangelista said. She suddenly realized something and said to Eric, "Eric, do you need our help? Accompany me to go shopping." Eric reluctantly put down the Walkman in his hand and said with a smile, "I suddenly want to go and see if I can buy something." "Of course, if you want to replace the runway yourself, then forget it." Of course not. This kind of small thing, let others do it." Linda Evangelista quickly shook her head, then looked at Cindy Crawford proudly. Cindy Crawford was a little depressed. Since she had just said that she had work today, she couldn't slack off in front of her big boss Eric. She could only sulk and ask reluctantly, "Eric, will you still come over tonight?" "It depends. I will return to Los Angeles the day after tomorrow. If there is nothing else, I can still come over tonight," Eric said with uncertainty. After breakfast, Cindy Crawford hurriedly left to work. Eric was tortured by Linda Evangelista for half an hour. He put on makeup that even he couldn't recognize himself. The woman continued to draw for half an hour before the two left the apartment. Eric's car was already parked outside the apartment. When the two got in the car, Linda Evangelista remembered and asked, "Eric, what are we going to buy?" Chapter 722. I don't know what to buy. Let's see when we get there. Eric touched his hair that was messed up by Linda Evangelista and asked the driver in the front seat, "Is there a Best Buy nearby?" Carter Moan was on break recently. The driver was another bodyguard in Eric's security team. He happened to be a New Yorker. When he saw Eric's sudden change in appearance, he even suspected that the boss had been replaced. When he heard him speak, he confirmed it and said, "There is one on 5th Avenue, next to Bryant Park. Let's go there." Eric nodded and told the driver to drive. Best Buy was the largest retail chain of electronic products in the United States. Linda remembered the Walkman that Eric fiddled with during breakfast and knew that it should be related to this matter. It was already past working hours, but the road was not crowded at all. The car took less than 10 minutes to arrive at the Best Buy store near Bryant Park from the Upper East Side. Eric got out of the car with Linda. There was no parking space nearby, so he asked the driver to drive away. It was a working day, so there were not many pedestrians on 5th Avenue. However, after the car left, the two people standing on the side of the road still attracted the attention of some pedestrians. It was not that Eric and Linda were recognized. Linda's exquisite makeup skills made Eric unable to recognize himself. The main reason for the attention was that the contrast between the two people's images was too big. Eric's hair was messy at this time. His originally handsome face looked young and mediocre after Linda's makeup. He was originally 25 years old, but now he looked like he was in his early 20s. Because he did not have a change of clothes today, his light gray shirt was slightly wrinkled, and he looked like a slovenly college student. On the other hand, Linda, who was beside him, had her hair tied up in a bun. She wore large sunglasses and flaming red lips, looking gorgeous. The black knee-length dress tightly wrapped around her exquisite and slender body. She held a Prada bag in her hand, and a decorative fur vest was draped over her shoulders, adding to her aristocratic temperament. More importantly, this woman was wearing stilettos. Her figure was already about the same as Eric's, and now, in terms of height and temperament, she completely outshone Eric. Noticing the envious and slightly disdainful gazes of the passers-by, Eric looked at the woman beside him who looked like she had succeeded in her prank. He smiled and said, "Are you very proud now?" Thinking that Eric was angry, Linda hurriedly held his arm intimately and said with a smile, "I also want to wear the same makeup as you, but I don't look like you." Eric didn't believe her words, but he didn't feel much about it. He had lived 2 lives and stood in his current position. The opinions of others wouldn't affect him much. Letting Linda fall on him, Eric pushed open the glass door of Best Buy and walked into the store. The hall was full of large household appliances. Looking at the schematic diagram of the distribution of goods, he walked in with Linda and said, "Do you know our current situation is very similar to a certain atmosphere of the European palace era?" Linda, like Eric, ignored the gazes of the people around them and asked, "What is it?" At that time, it was very popular for European noblewomen to keep talented young men as lovers. Those young men also liked to live off women. Linda laughed and said, "I've never heard of it. You must be making it up, haha." Of course not. Many famous people in history have lived off women. Linda still didn't believe him and asked, "Who were they?" Eric thought for a moment and said, "Rousseau." Linda nodded. "I think I've heard of him. Balzac." Linda's little face under the sunglasses was surprised. "Wow, really?" Eric nodded. "And Tchaikovsky." Linda's mouth was slightly open, and her face was full of disbelief. A moment later, she seemed to suddenly get into character, and waved the Prada bag in her hand. "Little Eric, pick whatever you want. I'll buy it for you." Linda seemed to be a little excited and forgot to lower her voice. The few customers and waiters in the store had already noticed this very incompatible couple. When they heard this, another wave of disdainful looks were thrown at Eric. Passing through the area, Eric happened to see the Apple brand counter, so he led Linda over. After roughly browsing, Eric wasn't interested in the retro-looking Macintosh and PowerBook. The laptop he often used now was an IBM ThinkPad. Without Steve Jobs, the design of Apple products could only be described as terrible. However, something that looked like a tablet caught Eric's attention. He signaled the salesperson in front of him, who was peeking at Linda from time to time, to take the tablet out of the counter. Eric roughly played with it and saw the Newton logo on it. He then remembered that this should be the early Newton tablet of Apple. The salesperson looked at Eric clumsily fiddling with the tablet in his hand. He even used his fingers to swipe on the screen. The salesperson didn't hide the disdain in his eyes. He was even more annoyed that this guy had hooked up with a beauty like Linda. He deliberately watched Eric use his fingers to swipe on the screen in vain for a while before he handed over the stylus and said in a stiff tone, "Sir, this tablet needs a stylus." "Oh, I forgot about that," murmured Eric. He picked up the stylus and wrote and drew more smoothly this time. "This is Apple's latest Newton MP110 series. It has an advanced handwriting recognition function and is very suitable for high-end business people. The price is $799 US. The salesperson deliberately emphasized the price of $799 US. For most ordinary people, $799 US was definitely not cheap. Compared to the simple functions of the tablet, it could even be described as a luxury item. However, to his disappointment, Eric didn't have any reaction at all. Linda, who was wearing sunglasses, raised her eyebrows slightly and a mischievous smile appeared on her face again. Eric tried out the notepad, memo, calendar, and other functions on the tablet before he looked up and asked the salesperson, "What is the screen material of this machine?" "What?" The salesperson was stunned. "I mean, what is the touchscreen material of this machine, STN or TFT?" The salesperson finally understood, but he couldn't answer. He noticed the smile on Linda's face and said, "I'm not too sure about this." Eric asked again, "What type of battery is it?" The salesperson knew about this and said, "It uses the latest lithium-ion battery developed by Sony. The capacity is more than twice that of the mainstream NIMH batteries." "Oh," Eric nodded and continued to ask, "How big is the storage capacity, and what type of memory chip is used?" The salesman was once again left speechless. He felt that Eric was purposely making things difficult for him. So he angrily said, "Mister, I'm just a salesman, not an engineer. Please don't make trouble here, okay?" Before Eric could say anything, Linda said, "Hey, you don't know anything and you're still a salesperson. Be careful, or I'll complain about you." The salesperson put on a fearless expression and said, "Madam, please don't show your fake Prada in front of me. My girlfriend also has a similar handbag. She bought it from an authentic store. Your handbag is obviously fake. I even suspect that you two are scammers. If you continue to make trouble, I'll call the security." The handbag in Linda's hand was a limited edition handbag. It was very different from the handbag sold in the store. She didn't expect that it would be fake. She was speechless and turned to look at Eric with a look that said, "I can't help you." Eric shrugged slightly. He was too lazy to be nosy. When he was about to leave with Linda, a middle-aged man wearing glasses walked over and asked the salesperson, "Jack, what happened here?" The salesperson named Jack immediately began to complain in a low voice. The middle-aged man waved his hand and asked him to leave. He turned his head and was about to say something to Eric and Linda when he saw Eric's expression. He narrowed his eyes and looked carefully. He still wasn't sure, but he didn't dare to be negligent. He said, "Sir, I'm the manager of this store, Ritter Jackman. You can call me Ritter. Can I serve you?" "Sure." Eric smiled and walked to the counter. He picked up the Newton tablet and asked the question. Ritter Jackman wasn't as ignorant as the salesperson. He smiled and answered, "This tablet uses the latest TFT LCD screen. It has 1M RAM and 4M storage. It uses Toshiba's flash memory chip. Do you have any other electronic products that use flash memory technology?" "Of course." The mobile phones, digital cameras, computers, and other products all use this technology. Eric asked again, "What's the maximum storage capacity of this chip?" Ritter Jackman thought for a while and said, "The maximum storage capacity should be the CF memory card developed by Shandy. This is a product launched by Shandy last year. It's mainly used in digital cameras. The maximum storage capacity is 16M. Sir, if you're interested, I can take you to have a look." 16M could only hold 4 MP3 songs at most. Eric was disappointed, but he still wanted to take a look. So he said, "Let's have a look. Also, prepare 5 of these tablets for me. I'll take them away later." Linda was puzzled. "Eric, why are you buying so many?" Eric smiled and said, "To give them away." Linda was still at a loss. Instead, it was Ritter Jackman who raised his eyebrows slightly. He acutely noticed that although the man and woman in front of him looked like a noblewoman and a coachman, that wasn't the case at all. His guess became more and more certain. Instructing the salesperson at the counter to prepare Eric's things, Ritter Jackman patiently led Eric to the digital camera area with a constant smile. At another counter, Ritter Jackman handed a stamp-sized memory card to Eric and said, "Sir, this is the CF card. It has 16 megabytes of memory and can store up to 100 photos. Do you need me to demonstrate it with a digital camera?" Eric looked at the card and shook his head. "No, it looks too big. The storage capacity is too small." Ritter Jackman wasn't angry at all. He smiled and said, "Sir, this is the limit of the current technology. 5 years ago, when flash memory chips first appeared, the storage capacity was only 1M. Now, only hard disks can achieve a larger storage capacity." "Oh." Eric's tone was a little higher. He suddenly remembered and asked, "Then, is there a hard disk the same size as the CF card?" "I haven't seen this." Ritter Jackman shook his head and said, "The smallest hard disk now is the 1.8-inch hard disk developed by Toshiba. It's used in their portable PDA. Do you have this kind of PDA here?" "Yes, please follow me," Ritter Jackman said, and brought Eric to the Toshiba product counter. He took out a Toshiba PDA and gave it to Eric. He introduced, "This is Toshiba's Libretto 20 PDA. It has a 6.1-inch TFT screen, 8M RAM, and 270M storage. It uses a 1.8-inch small hard disk internally." In the morning, when Eric saw Sinclair's Walkman, he quickly thought of the MP3 player. The MP3 audio format patent was now in the hands of Yahoo. Because of Yahoo's open licensing policy, it had become the most widely used audio format. Not only was it widely used on the internet, but it had also been used in some CDs. Last weekend, when he was discussing Yahoo's future development strategy with Chris, the two discussed the possibility of Yahoo's involvement in hardware products. At this time, Eric realized that the MP3 player was the most suitable. If he could hold the complete patent technology related to the MP3 player in advance, Eric could use Yahoo's platform to build an online music store, and then firmly control the entire music sales industry from the internet to the terminal. The music copyright laws in North America were very strict, and people generally had the habit of paying for music. This meant that Yahoo's involvement in the online music store was very promising. If Yahoo's music store could become a complete sales platform, the profits would definitely be no less than the hardware sales. Moreover, the MP3 player could be integrated into Nokia phones in advance. This was another development idea. Thinking about these things in his mind, Eric simply tried the Toshiba PDA that looked like a mini notebook, but he didn't know what the hard disk inside looked like. He said subconsciously, "Can I open it and take a look?" When Ritter Jackman heard Eric's words, he was slightly hesitant, but quickly said, "Of course, sir. However, there are no tools here. Shall we go to my office?" After asking, Eric wanted to shake his head. This kind of request seemed to be a bit too much. When he heard Ritter Jackman's answer, Eric understood and smiled. "You recognized me?" Ritter Jackman smiled and said, "If you didn't ask this question, I wouldn't be 100% sure, Mr. Williams." Chapter 723. In an office above the Best Buy store, the expensive Toshiba PDA had been dismantled into scattered parts. Eric looked at the credit card-sized Toshiba HDD in his hand and said to Ritter Jackman, 8 inches, it shouldn't be that big. I think this HDD is at least 4 inches. With Eric's identity exposed, Ritter Jackman became even more respectful. He patiently explained, "Mr. Williams, the size of the HDD doesn't refer to the external package, but the diameter of the internal disk." As Ritter Jackman spoke, he took the HDD from Eric's hand and skillfully opened the back cover with a dismantling tool. He showed Eric the silver disk inside the HDD, which was slightly bigger than a coin. He said, "These aluminum disks have countless fine magnetic particles attached to them. Through the operation of the magnetic head, they are arranged to represent zeros and ones to record data." Linda Evangelista had been very quiet as a listener. Hearing Ritter Jackman's concise description, she said in surprise, "That's amazing. I just heard you guys talking about the CF card. This one has a capacity 10 times larger than that. Doesn't that mean it can store more than 1,000 photos?" Ritter Jackman was very pleased with the reaction of the beautiful Linda. He smiled and said, "According to the current mainstream digital cameras, it can store about 1,600 photos." Linda asked, "Then why do digital cameras use the CF card with a very small storage capacity, and not this HDD?" Ritter Jackman said, "This involves too many factors such as technology, cost, market positioning, and even the company's strategic considerations. For example, if I were the CEO of Kodak, I would try my best to limit the appearance of digital cameras that use hard disk storage technology. Although Kodak produces photographic equipment, more than 70% of their turnover comes from the film business. The appearance of large-capacity digital cameras is simply a disaster for this company." Eric took back the HDD again and continued to think about the MP3 player. Hearing Ritter Jackman's words, he remembered the news of Kodak's sudden collapse in his previous life. He nodded approvingly, a little surprised that Ritter Jackman had such foresight. In fact, Eric's current identity was more inclined to be the guardian of the old order. According to his position as a major shareholder of Firefly Media Group, it was in his own interest to prevent the emergence of new media and new technology. However, Eric knew that if he really did that, he would eventually be eliminated from the market. In Fengyu's previous life, Sony's ending was the best example. At the beginning of the MP3 era, Sony's technology and music copyright resources far exceeded Apple's. However, they were losing ground in the MP3 market. The main reason was that Sony was hesitant to give up on the Walkman and enter the MP3 industry. They even tried to use Sony's strong position in the music industry to stop the development of MP3 and internet music sales. The result of this reversal was that the once dominant music player industry was completely squeezed out of the market in just a few years. Eric knew that if he brought out the MP3 player plan, he would definitely be boycotted by the major music companies in the future. Even the internal music department of Firefly Media Group would criticize him. However, if he didn't do that, it meant that this market would be handed over to an outsider. At that time, he would be even more passive. After shopping at Best Buy for 2 hours, Eric left with 2 full boxes of what looked like antiques from a futuristic point of view, but were now using the most advanced technology. Eric didn't go back to Cindy's apartment. Instead, he brought Linda to his residence on 6th Avenue. After a simple lunch, Eric started to organize the goods he bought in the morning. Linda walked around the luxurious duplex apartment overlooking the entire Central Park. She smacked her lips as she went downstairs. She saw Eric playing with a brick-like IBM mobile phone in the living room filled with electronic products. Occasionally, he would even type on his laptop. She came over and asked curiously, "Eric, this mobile phone is so big. Do people still use it?" Eric was holding an IBM Simon mobile phone in his hand. When he first saw this device, Eric was a little surprised. Although the size of this device was far larger than the mainstream mobile phones that had shrunk to the size of a palm, it was completely operated with a touchscreen. In addition to making calls, it also provided notebooks, memos, and a perpetual calendar. It was basically a smartphone, and it was very likely to be the world's first smartphone. It was 1995 now. This point once again proved that technology was never a problem. Strategy was the problem. If IBM in Liu Zhou's previous life could have used this strategy to continue their research, then Apple wouldn't have had a problem. Eric waved the IBM Simon in his hand and asked Linda, "If this phone was shrunk to the size of our palm, would you be willing to use it?" Linda took the phone and shook her head. "I'm not interested. It's just a phone. It's fine as long as it can make calls. These memos and notebooks are useless. Who would spend $1,000 on something that can be done with a notebook that costs less than 10 cents? Eric smiled and nodded. From Ritter Jackman in the morning, Eric learned that this bulky IBM mobile phone, Apple's Newton tablet, Sony's notepad, and Toshiba's PDA all had very poor sales. The reason was similar to what Linda said. These seemingly high-end electronic products had very simple functions and didn't have much market potential. Then let's make another hypothesis. Eric picked up the Newton tablet and said, "If you can use this tablet as an e-reader and can store a few hundred books, would you be willing to buy it?" "I don't like to read," Linda shook her head and said, "but as long as the price isn't too expensive, people who like to read should be willing to buy it." Well, the promotion failed. Eric smiled, put down the Newton tablet, picked up the Toshiba small hard disk, and said, "According to the MP3 audio format developed by Yahoo, this hard disk can store more than 50 songs. If the technology develops for a few years, it won't be a problem to store 100 or 200 songs. Then, if there is such a music player the size of a cigarette box that allows you to put hundreds of songs into your pocket at one time and listen to it anytime and anywhere, would you buy it?" "Of course I'm willing." Linda nodded and pointed at the electronic products scattered all over the room. "Eric, did you buy these things to develop the music player you mentioned?" "Yes." Eric nodded. He bought these expensive but not practical electronic products mainly because he wanted to understand the current technology level of the LCD screen, flash memory, hard drive, lithium-ion battery and other major components in the electronic field. He wanted to know if some of his ideas were feasible. Although the development of flash memory capacity hadn't reached the level of manufacturing practical MP3 players, and the micro-hard drive technology that was the main storage medium of MP3 players didn't appear in his previous life, but with the small hard drive and lithium-ion battery technology, developing an MP3 player the size of a cigarette box wasn't a problem. Although it wasn't as small as the chewing gum in his previous life, it was definitely more advanced than Sony's Walkman. Also, Eric's main purpose was to get hold of the complete patent technology of the MP3 player. This way, in the Western society where patent rights were strictly protected, at least there wouldn't be a situation like in his previous life where the ownership of patents was unclear and confusing, which led to many manufacturers rushing to produce MP3 players. Eric spent the whole afternoon dismantling most of the electronic products he bought into a pile of expensive parts. He also compiled a detailed memo on the development of e-readers, MP3 players, and even smartphones. It was already dusk when Eric came out of his work. Eric wanted to send this memo to Yahoo's executives and Nokia's Yoma Alala. But he remembered that Chris told him a few days ago that Microsoft wanted to poach people from Yahoo. He decided to wait until July for everything to be settled. He could also take the opportunity to make some preparations. Eric took out the 2 cardboard boxes he had used to store some electronic equipment in the morning. He picked out some equipment and parts related to the content of the memo, and put them in one box. The rest of the mess was thrown into the other box. Eric clapped his hands and remembered that Linda should still be here. The sound of the TV came from the living room next to the living room. Eric walked into the living room and saw a fashion show on the TV. Linda was curled up on the sofa, hugging a pillow and sleeping. She looked like a lazy cat at this moment. Her body was moving up and down with her breathing. Her blonde hair covered her face, and her red lips were slightly parted. She looked less handsome and more charming. Eric silently looked at the perfect girl that God had brought to the human world. He didn't want to wake her up. He sat down on the sofa beside Linda's feet, and sniffed the faint feminine scent in the room. He leaned back on the sofa and watched the TV quietly. After sleeping lazily for the whole afternoon, Linda had already woken up when Eric walked into the living room. Linda was curious about how Eric would react when he saw her sleeping. She didn't open her eyes immediately. She waited patiently for a while, but she felt Eric sitting down beside her feet and watching the TV quietly. She was very satisfied that Eric didn't go berserk and press her down 100 times or something, but she felt that this man's reaction was a bit abnormal. So she continued to pretend to sleep, but she secretly opened her eyes. The light in the living room was getting dimmer and dimmer. She could only see his chiseled side profile with the light from the TV. She had washed off the makeup she put on this morning, revealing her original face. She felt that this man's side profile was quite attractive. After a while, the program on the TV suddenly changed. The host turned on the TV and played a music video. She packed my bags last night pre-flight 0 hour 9 a.m. And I'm gonna be high as a kite by then I miss the earth so much as my wife asterisk it's lonely out in space asterisk on such a timeless flight asterisk and I think it's gonna be a long time asterisk. It was Rocket Man by the famous British singer Elton John. She liked this song very much. Elton John's voice was 3 parts sad, 3 parts dejected, 3 parts helpless, and the last part hysterical. The lyrics were about a rocket man who had been floating in space for a long time and missed his hometown and his wife, but she felt that it was more of a fable. It was a fable about a playboy who wanted a stable life but couldn't. This kind of story usually happened in movies. The bodyguards, agents, and soldiers who were about to retire were always involuntarily sent to carry out their last mission, and then naturally died. Of course, these people were definitely supporting roles. The main character had to continue to travel the world and make a movie series until the 16th movie. Before she fell asleep, MTV played a trailer. What was the 16th 007 movie called? Oh, GoldenEye. It was released in July. Her mind wandered for a moment, and she glanced at the man sitting on the other side. She didn't know that it was lonely at the top, and she didn't know that no one was listening when the string was broken. She instinctively felt that maybe he was also a rocket man. She felt that her body was stiff from sleeping, and she was also a little hungry. She didn't want to pretend to sleep anymore, so she opened her eyes and subconsciously stretched her slender body. Her small jade foot just happened to be on his leg. "You're awake." Eric turned his head and smiled as he held her slender ankle and placed it on his leg to make it easier for her to stretch out. She threw away the pillow in her arms and nodded. She felt that her ankle being held by Eric was slightly ticklish. She blushed and rubbed her face in embarrassment. She said in a coquettish tone, "I dreamed that you gave this house to me, and then I woke up with a smile." "Oh, it's good that you're awake. Otherwise, I would have cried in your dream." Although she was envious, she didn't imagine that Eric would give her this mansion worth tens of millions. If it really happened, she wouldn't dare to accept it. Although she wasn't very smart, she knew that everything in this world had a price. In the afternoon, she really did dream of this situation. The last touch of twilight created a dark environment, so she didn't have any ulterior motives. Eric's words made her somewhat disappointed. She kicked her foot and said, "In this situation, even if a playboy doesn't want to give a girl something, shouldn't he usually give her something perfunctory? You're so lazy." Eric pretended to be helpless and said, Okay, let me think about the lines. Under the fluorescent light of the TV, Linda's sparkling eyes stared at Eric with great interest. She had an unruly look on her face. After a moment, Eric slapped his forehead and said with a face full of realization, "Oh, I remember now. This house isn't mine." Ha, so uncreative. Hollywood gold medal screenwriter. Just make do. Eric laughed and asked, "Are you hungry? Let's go out and eat." Okay. Linda nodded. She was far more familiar with Manhattan than Eric. Just as she was about to make her suggestion, she heard a phone ring in the living room outside. "I'm going to take a call." "Wait a second." Eric got up and walked out. Her eyes followed him out of the living room. She was too lazy to get up. She twisted her body, grabbed the sofa armrest, and looked out. She saw the man pick up his phone and sit down on the sofa in the living room. She vaguely heard him talking to someone about Jurassic Park 2. It seemed to be the arrangements for the premiere. After chatting for nearly 10 minutes, Eric hung up. She was about to get up when she heard Eric's phone ring again. "Hello. Oh, Cindy, it's you." Eric answered. He felt her head poking out and waved at her. She smiled and could roughly guess Cindy's intention. She retracted her head and was too lazy to listen. Suddenly, she remembered his tone when he was talking to someone about work. It was serious and meticulous. What about her? She came from a good family and didn't have any pressure. When she grew up, she was too lazy to study and became a model. She started at the age of 16. 14 years. Step by step. Life seemed to be very simple. Work. Play. Don't wake up without $10,000 a day. Get married too early. Meet the wrong person. Don't want to make do anymore and divorce. Can't stand the boyfriend and break up. Follow your heart. It was boundless. She suddenly realized that she was the Rocket Man. No wonder she liked Elton John's song. He listened to the voices outside and continued to chat with Sinclair in a gentle tone, appearing to be very patient. Perhaps, although he was also floating in space, he was controlling everything, like the pilot of the space shuttle. No, he didn't control everything. At least, he didn't know what her ambitious fake best friend was thinking. She suddenly felt that she had a responsibility to do something. Her head buzzed for a while, and she jumped up from the sofa and walked into the living room. "Oh, George Jean Restaurant. Where is it?" Eric saw Linda walking over and didn't mind. He was talking to Cindy when Linda walked up to him. She flipped her blonde hair like a queen and sat on Eric's lap. She reached out and pushed him to the back of the sofa. Eric was listening to Cindy introduce the address of a restaurant when Linda suddenly pushed him to the back of the sofa. He could only ask Linda what was going on. On the other end of the phone, Cindy had already told him the address. Eric watched Linda unzip the back of her dress with her hands behind her back. She lifted the straps and skillfully took off her dress. She leaned over and gently nibbled on his neck. "Cindy, I remember. Linda and I, will be there in 15 minutes. "No, my dear Cindy, wait for us for another hour," Linda shouted into the phone without hesitation. She reached out and hung up the phone. Eric helplessly reached out and held Linda's soft waist. He smiled and said, "Okay, what's your mental state now? Were you bitten by a bug?" "Of course not." Linda reached out and held Eric's face. She kissed him fiercely and said in a hoarse voice, "I want to squeeze you dry." "Humph, baby Cindy, let's see what you're going to do tonight. PS1, I recommend the song Rocket Man. It's very nice. If someone watches California Lust, it will be even more touching. What is California Lust? Go search it yourself. PS2, I posted some pictures of Linda Evangelista. It's very interesting. You can enjoy it. PS3, occasionally some characters will suddenly have feelings while writing. If you write for a long time, it will be difficult to persist without feelings. So don't complain. Star. Chapter 724. For Hollywood, the 1995 summer season began with the release of Die Hard 3 on May 19th. But since the trailer of Jurassic Park 2 officially appeared at the Super Bowl at the beginning of the year, the eyes of the global media and fans were focused on this long-awaited blockbuster. June 2nd, The day Jurassic Park 2 was released, it became the official beginning of the summer season in the hearts of most ordinary people. The huge success of Jurassic Park 2 years ago was not only reflected in the record-breaking global box office of $1 billion, but also made the Jurassic Park brand deeply rooted in people's hearts, and even formed a cultural phenomenon. Although it was difficult for the Jurassic Park series to reach the heights of Star Wars in the 1970s, due to the gradual rise of CG special effects films, the potential commercial value of its brand still reached billions of US dollars. With this strong influence, the premiere of Jurassic Park 2 attracted strong attention from hundreds of media outlets around the world. Eric returned to Los Angeles from New York on the morning of May 31st and began the final preparations for the premiere of Jurassic Park 2 the next day. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon on June 1st, the premiere of Jurassic Park 2 was officially held at the Los Angeles Music Center. For the new version of Jurassic Park 2, Eric used director Joe Johnston, who had worked with Disney on many films. The director, who was a film special effects artist, produced the very successful family comedy, Honey, I Made the Baby Smaller, in the late 1980s. In the original timeline, Joe Johnston was supposed to be the director of Game of Bravehearts and Jurassic Park 3. Eric gave Game of Bravehearts to someone else and let Joe Johnston join the Jurassic Park series in advance. If the second film was successful as expected, Joe Johnston could continue to handle the third film. The star-studded red carpet session lasted for 2 hours. Because the media Q&A was scheduled after the movie screening, it was 7 o'clock in the afternoon. After a brief speech by the host, the movie officially began to play in the hall. The original Jurassic Park 2 was basically Spielberg's playful work. The plot was weak and messy, and the story progression still followed the plot of the first movie where the characters deliberately courted death. In the end, Spielberg even admitted that this was his worst film. Although in the original universe, the global box office of Jurassic Park 2 still reached more than $600 million US dollars. The reputation of the entire series was completely ruined, resulting in the third movie's global box office only reaching $300 million US dollars. The new version of Jurassic Park 2 used the general idea of the original version. However, in order not to repeat the same mistakes and maintain the good reputation of the series, the original story framework was completely overturned by Eric. In the new script, Eric toned down the exploration of Jurassic Island and deleted a portion of the side quests. He also didn't use the brainless plot of not courting death. Instead, he focused the story on the company that bribed the park's computer manager for dinosaur embryos, resulting in the final disaster. In order to build a new Jurassic Park and reap huge profits, the company captured all sorts of dinosaurs from Jurassic Island. When they successfully captured a Tyrannosaurus Rex, during the transportation process, the Tyrannosaurus Rex accidentally escaped, resulting in an even more disastrous outcome. The Tyrannosaurus Rex invaded the city. In the movie, the Tyrannosaurus Rex that rampaged through the city in search of its baby not only shocked the entire world, it also made the thousands of audience members in the theater cry out in shock. Without a doubt, this setting was extremely successful. After all, the revival of dinosaurs in modern society was already a huge gimmick, and the mountain-like Tyrannosaurus Rex invading the city was definitely more immersive than the isolated Jurassic Island. The tight storyline made everyone forget about the passing of time. The 2 hours of movie viewing passed in the blink of an eye. When the Tyrannosaurus Rex that caused a series of disastrous consequences was finally subdued, the credits rose and the music hall was filled with enthusiastic applause. The audience and guests that participated in the premiere gradually dispersed. In the press conference, it was time for the Q&A session. The invited reporters didn't discuss the quality of the movie, nor did they ask about the movie's box office expectations. Instead, they all used the first opportunity to ask a question that they had been holding back for more than a year. Mr. Williams, I'm a reporter from the Seattle Daily. First of all, I want to say that this is an excellent sequel, but we still don't understand why you gave up on directing the Jurassic Park series. In the press conference hall, a female reporter who was lucky enough to get the chance to ask a question stared at Eric and couldn't wait to ask. Eric took the microphone from the person next to him. With a faint smile on his face, he said, "I know everyone has been curious about this question for a long time, but my answer is not much different from Firefly's previous announcements, and I don't mean to be perfunctory. On the one hand, I don't like to repeat a certain work. On the other hand, and the most important reason, is that I'm too busy right now. It's difficult for me to separate a few months to fly overseas to shoot a movie." Mr. Williams, does this mean that you won't personally shoot movies in the future? Before the microphone was taken away, the female reporter asked again quickly. Eric thought for a moment and said, "To be honest, the first film Jurassic Park 2 years ago was the peak of my personal career." If a person has done something to the extreme, it is absolutely difficult for them to continue to do it with passion. Will I continue to shoot the next film? The answer is yes, because I'm still very young and have a lot of time. But when the next film will start, even I don't know. The microphone was passed to another reporter. The other person said, "Mr. Williams, I'm a reporter from the New York Times. Excuse me, under what circumstances will you continue to produce the next film?" "There are too many. For example, projects that I think can break through my limits, or scripts that arouse my strong interest. Of course, there is another situation. A friend once joked that I'm like a chef who runs a restaurant. If the chef is absent for some reason, I can replace him at any time. In fact, if Firefly's project needs me, I can also do it at any time." "Do you mean that you can direct any kind of movie project under Firefly?" Faced with this small trap, Eric shook his head slightly and smiled. "Oh, I'm not sure about this, but you can go back and look at the types of films I've produced over the years." There was a burst of laughter in the audience. A moment later, another reporter asked, "Mr. Williams, I'm a reporter from the Hollywood Reporter. Excuse me, the films you directed have achieved commercial success that others can't achieve. When do you plan to compete for the Best Director Oscar?" Eric wanted to ask, if you were already the President of the United States, would you still care about the Boy Scout Award? However, if he answered like this, the media would definitely interpret it as Eric Williams openly despising the Academy Award. Although Eric did think this in his heart, he would never say it in public. After pretending to hesitate for a moment, Eric said into the microphone, "Well, this is the last question about me. If the next question has nothing to do with Jurassic Park, I won't answer anymore. Then, to your question, my answer is that this will definitely be a very long story." Everyone in the audience was stunned for a moment, then realized that Eric's words were secretly mocking the Film Academy. They all laughed. As everyone knew, Eric was only 25 years old. In the more than half a century of Oscar history, no director had won an Oscar before the age of 30. Therefore, if Eric expressed his intention to compete for the Best Director Oscar, there would definitely be a long game between him and the Film Academy. It was conceivable that in order to maintain their authority, in order to show that they would never give in to Eric's various halos, and in order to increase the ratings of the awards ceremony, the Film Academy would definitely be more strict with Eric's Oscar films. Eric could even imagine that if he wanted to compete for the Oscars, it was likely that he would replace Xiao Lizhi and become the most talked about joke at every Oscars. Xiao Lizhi had now followed the path of history and stepped onto the big ship. Therefore, the matter of creating jokes for the fans would be left to him. After the premiere, Jurassic Park was officially released in North American cinemas. The number of screens opened once again broke the record, reaching 3,500, taking over the sequel of a movie that had once created a box office legend. One could imagine the pressure on Joe Johnston. Therefore, he did not have the playful heart of Spielberg in his previous life. He invested a lot of energy in this sequel. Although the final production cost was overrun, it was all obviously worth it. A tighter plot, more exquisite special effects, unknowingly spent 2 hours in the cinema. Without a doubt, Joe Johnston has delivered a satisfying answer to this sequel. Los Angeles Times, the setting of the Tyrannosaurus Rex running rampant in the city is amazing. Even in the cinema, watching the crowd being chased by the Tyrannosaurus Rex on the screen, my heart couldn't help but race, and I felt like running away. Hollywood Daily News, I originally thought that this would be a normal sequel, but in the case of the film continuing the style of the first film, The breakthroughs in plot and special effects are pleasantly surprising. The plot of the giant beast invading the city also makes people wonder if we should have more respect for nature and less destruction. New York Times compared to the one-sided negative reviews of the sequels in his previous life. The critics basically gave a positive review of this new version. With a good reputation and the number of screens in 3,500 theaters, the movie earned $31.7 million on its first Friday, easily breaking all the previous single-day box office records. Then $33.5 million on Saturday and $29.8 million on Sunday. In the end, after adding in the $5.6 million box office on the night of the premiere, everyone was surprised to find that Jurassic Park 2 once again broke a new record of $100 million for the first weekend with a box office of $106 million. At the same time, with Firefly's strong distribution channel operation, although Japan, Germany, and other major countries were not able to synchronize for various reasons, Jurassic Park 2 was released in 22 countries and regions simultaneously, and the three-day box office reached $60 million. The three-day global box office of $160 million easily exceeded all the production and distribution costs that Firefly invested in the sequel. Many people didn't even dare to imagine how high the movie would reach again. For Eric, seeing this box office result, the last trace of anxiety in his heart completely dissipated. At the same time, he was 100% sure that the sequel of Jurassic Park, in his previous life, was really screwed up by his classmate. In fact, this was not too surprising for Eric. With the huge popularity of the first movie, the excellent quality of the second movie, and the further expansion of the North American and global film markets, even if the box office did not reach the first movie's high, it would not be too far off. Moreover, in his previous life, Jurassic Park was rebooted after being shelved for many years. The box office of Jurassic World in North America was $600 million, and the box office of $1.6 billion worldwide was enough to prove that people were very interested in the dinosaur series. Culver City, Los Angeles, Columbia Pictures Studio. A black Lincoln slowly stopped in front of the studio's office building. The CEO of Sony's American branch, Howard Stringer, had just gotten out of the car when the new CEO of Columbia Pictures, Bill Mechanic, came up to him. Bill Mechanic was also a senior executive in Hollywood. He had worked at Paramount, Disney, and Fox. When he was at Disney in the mid-80s, Bill Mechanic single-handedly led the distribution of Disney's classic animated films and created a series of good sales records. At the end of the 80s, Bill Mechanic jumped to Fox as the vice president. After Fox appointed Joe Ross as the CEO, Bill Mechanic had already started planning to jump ship. After Sony gave up on Michael Ovitz as the head of Columbia Pictures, they searched for a few months, and the position fell into Bill Mechanic's hands. In fact, it was not that Columbia did not have a better choice. It was just that after the incident with Peter Guber and John Peters, Sony became very cautious about giving up power to the film company's managers. Therefore, a group of outstanding Hollywood managers lost interest in the position of the head of Columbia Pictures because of Sony's restrictions during the negotiation process. Howard Stringer and Bill Mechanic hugged each other warmly, exchanged a few words, and walked to the office building together. Bill Mechanic followed Howard Stringer and said, "Howard, you should have seen the box office report of Jurassic Park 2, right?" "Of course." Howard Stringer nodded. "I came here today to talk to you about this. The headquarters just sent me a project. In my opinion, its box office potential is no less than Jurassic Park 2. Chapter 725. Bill Mechanic brought Howard Stringer to his office. As soon as he sat down, Howard Stringer took out a document from his briefcase and said, "Bill, take a look at this first." Bill Mechanic took it and opened it. The first thing he saw was a picture of a dinosaur-like monster with scales all over its back. Bill Mechanic blurted out without thinking, "Godzilla?" "Yes, Godzilla." Howard Stringer nodded and took the coffee from Bill Mechanic's secretary. He waved his hand to let the secretary leave and continued, "Yesterday, Mr. Choi contacted me and sent me this information. Sony's headquarters has started to contact Toho, and we'll soon get the authorization. He hopes that we can use Hollywood's most advanced CG special effects technology to bring this monster to the big screen. Since the first Godzilla special effects movie appeared in 1954, the image of this monster, which was born out of the nuclear fear in Japan, had spread all over the world and gathered a lot of popularity. In addition to the more than 20 Godzilla movies produced by Toho, Godzilla comics, animations, toys, and other products all over the world were endless. The image of this monster even had a huge impact on many movies involving giant monsters. Bill Mechanic understood that Sony's top management must have been stimulated by the box office explosion of Jurassic Park 2, so they came up with the idea of making a CG special effects version of Godzilla on a whim. Since it was based on the Jurassic Park series, the budget of this project would definitely not be less than $100 million. However, if this project was started, it would conflict with his development strategy for Columbia. After pondering for a moment, Bill Mechanic asked, "Howard, what is Mr. Choi's specific plan for this project? You know, Columbia's current situation is not very good." "I know what you are worried about, Bill," Howard Stringer said with a smile on his face. "There is no problem with the budget. Mr. Choi said that as long as we can do this project well, Sony is willing to bear a production budget of $150 million and will spend $50 million for distribution. He hopes that the first movie will be famous and then make it into a series like Toho." When Bill Mechanic heard Howard Stringer's words, he didn't feel happy at all. If Sony were to spend $200 million on this project, then the global box office sales would have to reach at least $500 million to break even. Although 2 years ago, Jurassic Park had pushed the highest Hollywood box office record to $1 billion, Bill Mechanic, who had been in Hollywood for 20 years, knew very well that even with the expansion of the global box office market, it was definitely not an easy task to make a film with a global box office of $500 million. Last year's Hollywood film market could be described as brilliant compared to the past, but in the whole year, there were only 6 films that exceeded $500 million at the global box office. Bill Mechanic could imagine that if this $200 million project failed again, Sony's confidence in the movie business would be destroyed. They might even withdraw from Hollywood like Panasonic. Every time a big movie company changed hands, it meant a change in management. At that time, as the CEO, his future would be uncertain. After hesitating for a while, Bill Mechanic said, "Howard, when I joined the company, I said that if Sony wants to operate the movie business in the long term, in the next few years, they should focus on producing low and medium budget movies. Through this conservative management strategy, they can steadily repair Columbia's production and distribution system that was on the verge of collapse. At that time, you and Mr. Choi agreed with my idea. Why should we take the risk now?" Howard Stringer explained patiently, "Bill, Mr. Choi's original words were that Sony wants Columbia to have a very representative movie series. Howard, I just think this decision is too stupid. They should know what it means if this project fails. Also, if the Japanese want to maintain their image, Men in Black and Game of the Brave should be enough." Bill Mechanic shook his head and continued, "Howard, I think we should persuade Mr. Choi to give up this idea. Even if we want to do it, we should delay it for 2 or 3 years. We should wait for Columbia to recover before making any plans." Howard Stringer was from the media industry. He knew that Mr. Choi had appointed him as the CEO of Sony's U.S. subsidiary, because he wanted him to revive Sony's entertainment business. Not only Sony's top management, even Howard Stringer himself was shocked when he saw the box office figures for Jurassic Park 2. Therefore, when Sony threw out the Godzilla project, Howard Stringer also felt that it was a good idea. However, he didn't expect to be rebuffed by Bill Mechanic before he could even say a few words despite having rushed over in high spirits. "Bill, we want to get rid of Men in Black and Game of the Brave. That's why we need to do this project alone. As long as we have our own ace movie series, we will no longer be controlled by others." Bill Mechanic still wanted to say something, but when he saw Howard Stringer's serious expression, he realized that it wasn't appropriate for him to continue arguing with his direct superior. He softened his tone and said, "Then Howard, we can do this project, but I think it's best to postpone it for a year. We all know the situation in Colombia. Because of Peter Guber, Colombia's production and distribution business has been in a semi-stagnant state since the second half of last year. Although it has improved in the past few months, if we can have another year. Bill, this is the decision of the headquarters. Seeing that Bill Mechanic was no longer against this plan, and was willing to let go of his authority, Howard Stringer was very satisfied. At the same time, he felt that his tone was too harsh. He was not a strong-willed person. What he said just now was what Shinji Ide had told him privately. The Sony board of directors did not want to see another uncontrollable manager in Colombia. It was just that he and the Sony executives did not realize that letting the horse be reined in may cause the horse to lose control. But if the reins were too tight, the result would often be strangling the horse to death. So, Bill, who do you think is the most suitable director for this film in Hollywood? Howard Stringer asked in a gentle tone with the intention of easing the atmosphere. I think we should first solve the problem of special effects. Although Bill Mechanic felt Howard Stringer's thoughts, he was still determined not to get involved in this matter. Therefore, he would not take the initiative to recommend a director. He just said, if we want to use CG technology to bring Godzilla to the big screen, the only one in Hollywood that can handle the special effects of this project is Digital Domain. But after the incident at the beginning of the year, our relationship with Firefly is not very good now. Although Firefly said that Digital Domain is operating independently, no one can guarantee that Firefly will not deliberately set obstacles for us. Wasn't the special effects of Universal's The Mummy also done by Digital Domain? Howard Stringer thought for a while and said, the relationship between Michael Eisner and Eric Williams was much worse than Firefly and Columbia. I think this should be mainly because of the female lead, Nicole Kidman, mediating, Bill Mechanic said. She is Eric Williams' woman, and she received a sky-high salary of $30 million from the first The Mummy. To a large extent, this should be the price Universal paid for the success of the Mummy series. If Godzilla can be successful, it's not like we can't afford this price. Howard Stringer pondered for a moment and said, so, do you think we can use the same strategy as Universal? Bill Mechanic shook his head and said, I don't think so. Warner's Fair Game, released at the end of May. The female lead, Claudia Schiffer, is also Eric Williams' woman. However, this action film, which cost $50 million to produce, had a box office of less than $10 million in its first week. Last weekend, under the impact of Jurassic Park 2, the box office for the 3-day weekend dropped by 57% and only earned $3 million. Originally, some evaluation agencies predicted that the box office could reach $30 million, but now, it seems like it would be good if it could reach $25 million. I heard about this at a business cocktail party a few days ago, Howard Stringer said. It's said that during the preparation of the film, Eric Williams predicted that this project would fail. Joe Silver made a lot of changes to the project in an attempt to save it, but it was to no avail. I didn't hear anything about the female lead. Bill Mechanic thought that at a formal business cocktail party, people would of course not talk about this kind of gossip. They would just pay a little more attention to Hollywood. These things were never a secret. Anyway, Howard, we have to solve the problem of the special effects first. Secondly, for such a big project, it's very important to find a reliable director. This director should have directed a successful special effects blockbuster before. Although he did not intend to get involved, Bill Mechanic still tried his best to guide Howard Stringer on the right path. Howard Stringer almost immediately thought of Jurassic Park 2, which had been in the limelight recently. Then maybe we can try to get in touch with Joe Johnston. It would be great if it works. Bill Mechanic nodded in agreement, but he did not have much hope. Since Firefly let Joe Johnston take over Jurassic Park, they would definitely sign a strict option contract with him. Unless someone was willing to pay a huge penalty for him, or Firefly was merciful enough to let him go, the possibility of Joe Johnston working for other film companies in the next few years was very low. You're tuning into the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.